So you'd be a divorcee? Maddie was a little confused. What do you mean? Stacy seemed less upset about the marriage than Maddie had anticipated. Did that mean she didn't mind it? What was Jeff thinking? Stacy asked. Did he really marry you because he had no choice but to get into a marriage? This was the crux of the matter. Anyway, she wasn't related to the Holmes family by blood. If Jeff really wanted to marry Maddie, then she wouldn't object. Right now, the only thing she was worried about was Maddie suffering a loss. Jeff, Maddie stammered, trying to answer the question. Do I want you to get divorced? Is it nice to get divorced? What do you even know about marriage and divorce? Maddie wanted to say that her thoughts were too old-fashioned, but she kept her mouth shut. She knew her mom very well. Once Stacy's mind was made up, there was no way to change it. Mom, you're not going to look for Jeff, are you? Am I supposed to pretend I don't know? Mom, don't go looking for him. Let me settle this myself, Maddie begged. No, I have to find him and tell him that there will be a real wedding. Oh, wait, what? Maddie was shocked to hear her mom mention a wedding. He can't do this to you, Stacy exclaimed. Aren't you practically excommunicated from the Holmes family? Is it really safe for he to get involved? Maddie asked. The intensity of Stacy's anger suddenly lessened. A thought had occurred to her. Does Stephen know? Asked Stacy. Yes. What did he say? He wasn't angry? Why aren't you angry? Maddie asked Stacy, who had fallen silent. Mr. Holmes was extremely angry, but no one could change Jeff's mind. If he doesn't want to do something, it's useless to tell him. Maddie knew how stubborn Jeff was. Naturally, Stacy did as well. And if not for that knowledge, Stacy would have been the first to confront Jeff. But now she hesitated. Was it really useful for her to talk to Jeff? Seeing her mom's apprehension, Maddie immediately said, Mom, you don't have to worry. I'll take care of it. Maddie said goodbye to Stacy and waved as her mom drove away. She believed it was settled. No matter what, however, Stacy knew she couldn't let Maddie handle this alone. Maddie didn't ask Jeff to pick her up after shopping. In fact, she didn't call Jeff at all. Instead, she walked around aimlessly. When her cell phone rang, Maddie looked at the caller ID, so angry that she turned off the phone and tossed it in her purse. She wanted to find a way to divorce Jeff before Stacy found out. Now, even if she wanted to leave, Stacy wouldn't agree. It was all Jeff's fault. If it hadn't been for him, she wouldn't be in this mess. And there was also Lydia, who was lingering around like a ghost. What did it have to do with her? Lydia just wanted someone to blame for Jeff not marrying her. What had Maddie done wrong? Wasn't she innocent? She noticed a bar on the corner and went inside. In the dim bar, Maddie curled up in a corner booth, drinking wine straight out of the bottle. She watched a woman perform a song and dance to something on the stage, her eyes too misty to focus. Obviously, she had already drunk too much. But she wasn't done yet. She could still feel the pain. Jeff, you bastard! She yelled into the noise of the bar. It's your fault I'm in this mess, you bastard. Maddie swiped the air angrily with her wine bottle. She took another long drink of wine, her hands shaking. At that moment, someone sat down in the seat across from her. Maddie didn't even raise her head. Sorry, that seat's taken. Find somewhere else to sit. But the uninvited guest didn't move. Maddie looked up angrily. Maddie was drunk, but not so drunk that she didn't recognize the person now in front of her for the second time that night. You're really persistent, Maddie bluntly said. Because of the wine, Maddie didn't have the slightest hesitation. Lydia said with a mask of a smile, Me? I came to see you out of the kindness of my heart. If you got drunk and something happened to you, I feel just awful. What will happen to me? Maddie frowned as she asked with hazy, drunken eyes. For example, you could be harassed or something. There are all kinds of people in this bar every night. It happens all the time." After Lydia finished speaking, she pretended to remember something and exclaimed, "I forgot! You're so ugly that even if you pass out drunk, no one will want you." How could Maddie not hear the mockery in her words? Just as she was about to respond, someone else came over from the other side of the bar. "Lydia, why are you over here? Why aren't you going to the VIP section?" It was Lydia's good friend, Cassie. When she saw Maddie, she asked, "Who is this?" "Jeff's wife." Lydia glanced at Maddie as she spoke. "You're kidding. Her?" Cassie asked with an exaggerated expression. "How can he stand to look at a face like that every day?" "He must have extraordinary willpower." Lydia's disdain was evident in her eyes. Cassie moved forward to examine Maddie's face. Maddie frowned. This Cassie person was so rude. "You have a lot of confidence to think you can marry Jeff with that face," Cassie teased. "If you look like this, then is your whole family this ugly?" As Maddie expected, Lydia's friends all had the same bad character as she did. Birds of a feather flocked together. "What did you say?" Maddie flew into a rage and slammed the bottle onto the table. "What, you didn't hear it the first time? All right, I'll say it again. If you look like this, then... Ugh!" Before Cassie could finish her sentence, Maddie lifted the half-full bottle of wine and emptied it onto Cassie's head and face. Cassie's makeup started to run down her face. Seeing that, Maddie smiled and pointed at her. "So much for you calling me ugly. Now you're ugly too." "You tramp!" Cassie was so angry that she stepped forward to hit Maddie. But Maddie refused to back down. She lunged at Cassie, grabbed her hair, and pulled her to the ground. Cassie kicked and screamed. Because she was wearing high heels, Cassie tumbled to the ground. But Maddie, who wore flats, was steady on her feet. "You think you can insult my family? I'll teach you." Maddie swung a fist towards Cassie's face. "What does it have to do with you that I'm ugly? Who are you to judge me?" Cassie continued to flail and scream. "Lydia, get her off me!" Until then, Lydia had been staring in shock at Maddie's drunkenness. But when she heard Cassie call her, she quickly sprang into action to help her friend. However, before she could even get to Maddie, someone appeared and pulled her away. Then Maddie felt a hand tightly grabbing her wrist. She cried out in pain, twisting her body to escape the shackles. She was in the middle of a fierce fight. Perhaps someone else had been hit in the commotion and had joined in. But why was it so painful? Who was grabbing her? Jeff firmly grabbed her hand and stopped it mid-swing, making Maddie stop to look at him. He said in a low voice, "Stop messing around." The familiar voice made Maddie's mind clear up a little. She stared at the face in front of her. In her stupor, Jeff's face seemed to shake. She held Jeff's face between her hands and pouted with dissatisfaction. "Don't shake. I can't see you anymore." Jeff looked silently back at Maddie. Lydia and Cassie, who had just gotten up from the ground, were completely shocked by what they saw. Maddie was touching Jeff's face. They already knew what kind of person Jeff was when he was a teenager. He was absolutely terrifying, especially to women. And now Maddie was being so reckless, touching him that way. What shocked them even more was that Jeff didn't rip her hands away from his face. "How much did you drink?" Jeff's face darkened. "Let me think." Maddie tilted her head, trying to think through her drunkenness. "Ah, I remember you now," Maddie said, her eyes widening. "You're Jeff." Was that a question? Had she actually drunk enough to forget him? "No, I can't go back." Maddie struggled on the spot. "Where will you go?" Jeff held her waist tightly, not letting her get away from him. "It's fine if they bully me and call me ugly, but they tried to humiliate my family. Tell me, aren't they going overboard? Shouldn't I teach them a lesson? Maddie asked Jeff with a determined look on her face. Jeff's eyes turned cold. Did they really do that? I'm not lying to you. Maddie shook her head more vigorously than necessary. Jeff looked at Lydia and Cassie with a sinister gaze. His thin lips parted as he said, Then let's get a few people over here and let these two have a taste of what it feels like to be insulted. Lydia and Cassie immediately turned pale. Lydia quickly stepped forward. Jeff, that isn't true. She misunderstood me. So it was just a misunderstanding? Jeff's expression was dark. It was a misunderstanding. Why would I say those things? I know she's your wife. Lydia suppressed the fear in her heart and explained to Jeff, Maddie drank so much wine, she must have misheard. Maddie looked up. She was drunk, but she could still feel the anger radiating from Jeff's body. It made her shiver. But Jeff seemed to be helping her. Maddie didn't know why, but she felt very comfortable with Jeff there. She was finally calm enough to stop arguing with Lydia and Cassie. Jeff, let's go home, Maddie said as she buried her face in Jeff's chest. I'm over it, but I don't want to see them. Jeff glanced at Lydia with a cold and terrifying gaze before gently lifting Maddie into his arms and leaving the bar. In the passenger seat of Jeff's sports car, Maddie was feeling the effects of the wine. It was getting stronger and stronger. She kept sliding down onto the floor under the seat. Jeff pulled Maddie over to him with a stern face and pressed her body to his chest. Like a cat, Maddie sighed and rubbed Jeff's chest as if it were the most comfortable spot in the world. Finally, she buried her face in Jeff's neck and fell asleep. Jeff's expression turned soft as he looked at the drunk girl. He was not that old, but he had learned how to drown his sorrows with wine. The thought made Jeff's heart tighten. Maddie's sweet scent was constantly wafting over, causing Jeff's breathing to become heavy. He shut his eyes to block it out, but it was impossible to conceal the longing in his body. Back at the mansion, Jeff carried Maddie back to her room and laid her down on the bed. She was still holding onto Jeff's suit with one hand. Her messy little face was flushed from the alcohol, and her brows were furrowed. Her mouth was slightly agape as she slurred in a whisper. Water. Water. Jeff looked down at her with a hunger he couldn't explain. The light from the window reflected in his dark eyes. Do you want some water? Jeff's voice was hoarse and his throat was tight, as if he were the one that was thirsty. Maddie replied softly. I'll give it to you to drink. Jeff pressed a glass of water against Maddie's soft lips. With her eyes closed, Maddie opened her lips to receive the liquid and drank it gratefully. The more Jeff looked at Maddie, the more frustrated he got. He removed his arm from her back and let her drop onto one side of the bed. Maddie woke up with a splitting headache. She let out a piercing shriek when she saw a figure lying in bed next to her. Before Jeff's eyes were open, he scrunched his eyebrows and shouted, Shut up! Maddie kept her mouth shut, but her eyes were filled with fear as she looked at Jeff's hard muscles. Under the moonlight, Jeff's body made Maddie's heart beat faster. But now, not only was Maddie's face burning, she was also stunned. He was shirtless, but Maddie wondered if he'd undressed entirely. She pulled up the blanket and looked at her lower body in a panic. Then she looked at Jeff, who had woken up and was sitting up on the bed calmly. He had even lit a cigarette and was smoking. You touched me? While I was drunk? Maddie's voice was shaking. Nope. Jeff's thin lips let out white cigarette smoke. No. Maddie moved her body. It was a little sore and painful. You're saying that you didn't touch me? Then why am I in pain? I said nope. If not for her makeup, one could see the color had left Maddie's face. Maddie wondered how Jeff could be so casual about it. Was he telling the truth? Would he? Could he be so cruel? Maddie glared at Jeff. Even if you didn't touch me, it's not all right for you to be in here when I'm blackout drunk. Jeff didn't move, and Maddie tasted the acrid residue of alcohol as she gritted her teeth. Get out. Thinking about how drunk she was made her head throb even more. Jeff rose and walked over to the closet. He looked over his shoulder at Maddie, and she ducked her head under the blanket, hoping he was looking for a shirt to put on. Once Maddie heard the shifting of hangers, she stuck her head back out. She glanced around for something to distract herself and noticed her clothes lay crumpled around the foot of Jeff's bed. She felt like crying. Why did she drink so much? Why did Jeff have to be the one that found her? Maddie only remembered running into Lydia and her friends at the bar. A fight? Then Jeff appeared and took her back to his car. She couldn't believe she'd been so reckless. When Jeff resurfaced fully clothed, Maddie said to him, a clear warning in her voice, "If you see me drinking and fighting at a bar in the future, just pretend you don't know me. But in any case, it doesn't matter. This will never happen again." But what if it does? Maddie wondered what he was playing at. "Then I will make it so that you will never be able to go home with me again." Jeff studied her sullen expression, then shook his head. "Hurry up and get dressed. Lunch is almost ready." He turned and left the room. Finally alone, Maddie wrapped her body in the blanket and slid down from the bed. She really wanted to forget last night, but she knew she couldn't walk around like this or borrow something to wear from Jeff. So, enduring the sour stench, she put her clothes on carefully. When Maddie was done, she went to the door and opened it. The moment she stepped into the hall, she bumped into a passing maid. The maid inclined her head. Maddie felt as if she'd been caught in a trap and ran to her room. As she slammed the door behind her, she considered what others thought when they saw her. No one here knew about her and Jeff's marriage. Maddie quickly showered, brushed her teeth, and donned a fresh outfit to steady herself. Afterward, though a sense of unease lingered, she felt calm enough to head downstairs. When Maddie entered the dining room, Jeff's dark eyes tracked her as she walked over to the table and sat on a chair. Her guilt was reflected in them. Jeff's phone rang, and he picked up without saying a word. It seemed like the caller was doing all the talking because he merely nodded and uttered a few additional affirmations. Almost as swiftly as he answered, he hung up. "Next week, Stephen is hosting a banquet for his birthday. I'd like you to come with me." Maddie cocked her head. Isn't Stephen your dad? And are you sure it'd be okay for me to come? I don't want to upset him or..." Jeff scoffed. "Of course, you're Mrs. Holmes. No one would dare to say anything against you being there." "Can I not go?" He shoved a plated sandwich across to her. "What do you think?" Maddie lowered her gaze and fiddled with the sandwich. She was annoyed, but nothing she could say would get through to him. So she absent-mindedly lifted it and took a bite to fill a little of the hollowness within her. Later in the day, Maddie went out for a stroll at Vista Hermosa. What was she going to wear to Stephen's party? It wouldn't be anything as casual as this sweatsuit and sneakers. But sometimes she had doubts, maybe even insecurities, about her style and the overall way she carried herself, since it didn't possess any of the fierceness Jeff exhibited. Maddie exited the park and began the short journey back to her car. "Yo, who is this?" Maddie whipped around, not recognizing the sharp, mocking tone. Her mind reeled at the sight of Lydia and a dashing woman because she remembered the latter's name, Cassie, and that they fought last night at the bar. It was quite the coincidence for them to cross paths again. But her relationship with Lydia was beyond repair, so there was no point sticking around and risking having to rehash things. Maddie turned to leave. Unexpectedly, Cassie tried to block her, and Maddie snapped. "What? You miss these hands?" Maddie could tell Cassie was recalling what happened at the bar by the way she took a less bold step back. Outraged at how Maddie's words rattled Cassie, Lydia walked forward haughtily and said, Who do you think you are? Don't forget Maya and Jeff's family have been friends for a long time. You're too insignificant to be worth risking that relationship and destroying their reputation. Maddie knew, from what her mom told her, that this wasn't entirely true. The Baskins needed Holmes more than they needed them. Cassie's courage was reignited by Lydia's words. She sneered. I bet Jeff is too embarrassed to take you with him to his dad's banquet, because he doesn't want all of Los Angeles to know he married a hag. Lydia flashed a cruel smile. Most definitely. And, speaking of, we have a fitting to get to. Cassie hooked her arm with Lydia's, scrutinizing Maddie from head to toe, and burst out laughing. Even our chic dresses wouldn't do anyone so ugly any favors. Lydia and Cassie chuckled as they spun around and headed into a boutique past the park's entrance. The arrogance of the wealthy, Maddie thought, as she watched them leave indifferently. She hadn't cared about going to the dinner, but knowing it would irk them made her eager to attend. An entire floor of the IHG Hotel downtown was reserved, though only the banquet hall was to be used. Stephen's distinguished guests were done up as luxuriously as the room, and the flowing food was exquisite and delicious. Not long after the festivities had commenced, there was a commotion at the hall's entrance when Jeff arrived, alone. Despite his initial demands, he was afraid, when Maddie came, that her character and appearance would tarnish his own. At their table, Cassie leaned closer to Lydia, face full of joy, and said, Look who's flying solo. Glad she had the decency so no one's rest will be disturbed tonight. A woman behind Lydia interjected. Who are you talking about? And why haven't you gone over and greeted Jeff? We all know you're the only one for him. Another woman to the left of the first nodded. Lydia is the prettiest person here. With a smile lacking humility, Lydia leisurely took a sip of champagne. The first woman asked, Also, who are you talking about? Is it anyone we'd know? Cassie knew anything she said would only pique the other woman's curiosity, so she conceded. Oh no, it is this unsightly woman who's bothering Jeff. To prove her point, she pulled out her phone and showed a picture of Maddie, and the crowd that had gathered around them gasped in disbelief. Someone exclaimed, She should be ashamed to show her face. On the balcony of the lounge adjacent to the hall, Jeff lit a cigarette and checked his watch. He regretted allowing her to come alone. After finishing his cigarette, he returned to the hall. He didn't see Maddie, and his expression hardened. What are you angry about? Jeff started and looked to his right. Stephen gazed out at the city with a stout crystal tumbler in hand. He took a sip of his drink. You were right not to bring her. You know I'm angry with myself for being hard on you during your first marriage. It made you distrust me, so you lied about your impulsive decision with Maddie. On the surface, there was sincere regret in Stephen's voice. However, Jeff was too familiar with the consequences of falling for it. With as much ice as he could muster, he said, Save it. Stephen's face flushed, and he discreetly took a breath. I'm saying what you already know. You can't bring a woman around that everyone tells me is hideous. Divorce her and find someone more suitable for both your sakes. Jeff threw up his hands. It didn't matter to him whether Maddie was beautiful or ugly. He married her because she was a choice Stephen wouldn't make, that very few would make, and because he longed to say she was his. Stephen opened his mouth to continue, but he was interrupted by a commotion at the door. Jeff looked in that direction and was stunned at the sight of Maddie for the first time. Maddie stepped into the banquet hall in an off-the-shoulder white gown with metallic beads swirling up the bodice from its swishing skirt. She fussed with her bun, internally longing to be her other normal self. Lydia and Cassie gave her nasty looks, wishing vehemently that she would disappear. Maddie did slow circles at the center of the space. Despite his distance, when she saw Jeff, she could feel a coldness radiating from him. She hurried to him. I'm sorry I'm late, Jeff. Jeff glanced at Maddie's face mechanically, then everywhere but at her. Stephen recovered from his shock. Was this striking woman Maddie? He remembered visiting Stacy's house when Maddie was 10. How well behaved the little girl who peeked from behind her mother's legs was, as well as her delicateness and big round eyes. The woman in front of him was even more beautiful, and not hideous as others thought of her. Lydia and Cassie gawked at Maddie as if they'd seen a ghost. Could she have disguised her beauty the whole time? Or was this all thanks to good makeup? A man in their posse whispered to another, "Lydia seems so ordinary compared to her." Indignant, Lydia stormed out of the hall with Cassie on her heels. Stephen's business partner asked, "Is this your daughter-in-law, Stephen? How wonderful." Stephen smiled awkwardly. Maddie had come to fight for herself and her place in this family, while diverting Jeff's attention to her. So she summoned her confidence and said resoundingly, "Happy birthday to my dear Mr. Stephen." Stephen told Maddie thank you without meeting her eyes. He was regretting this banquet. His business partner began to joke about him being afraid to look at her, but with Jeff staring him down, he swallowed his words. Stephen led him back to their shared table on the other side of the room. Jeff dragged Maddie into the lounge. Maddie twirled. "What's wrong? You don't like it?" Her skirt gently flapped in the breeze coming from outside. Jeff silently assessed her. Maddie was secretly pleased with herself, and she shifted her face closer to his. "Nothing to say." Jeff was so shaken by Maddie that his body tensed. She emitted a faint fragrance that assaulted his nostrils and caused his heart to feel as if it had stopped beating for a moment. Maddie touched Jeff's cheek tentatively. "You don't have to be nervous. This is my true face, which I only concealed because of all the attention I receive can be overwhelming." She sighed. "But I want to find a way to love it as much as the distorted version. So I understand if that means you no longer want to be with me." Jeff snickered. "As if I'd let you go that easily." Maddie shrunk back a little from Jeff, and he continued harshly, "You'll be whatever version of yourself I tell you to be for the rest of our lives." "I won't." "It's not up to you." Maddie tried to withdraw completely from Jeff, and he reached up to clasp her chin. He bent down to kiss her, but she wrenched her face out of his grip and sidestepped. Pulse racing, she scanned the room for a way out that wouldn't require her to go near Jeff again. After taking a breath, she noticed the silhouette of a sink through an ajar door in the lounge's back corner. She made a beeline for it. Jeff snorted. "Where are you going?" "I'm sure me using the washroom myself isn't a look you'd prefer." She felt Jeff's eyes bore into her back as she opened the bathroom door. He shouted, "I'm going to get what I want." When Maddie was sure Jeff had gone, she went back into the banquet hall and saw him talking with other guests nearby. Eager to be alone, Maddie edged around him and found a random spot to sit where there weren't too many people. She signaled a server, and a couple minutes later, they brought her a plate with herb chicken thighs flanked by neat mounds of steamed broccoli and pilaf. As they retreated, she told them to take the wine and poured water into her glass from the carafe at the table's center. A shudder ran through her, replaying last night and what just happened. She took some slow, needed breaths and kept eating, more as a distraction than nourishment. Maddie was so preoccupied that she didn't at first register an older man sitting down next to her. Baffled, she simply blinked at him as he settled in his chair and shook several brown and kernel-shaped objects from a ramekin he carried into his palm. The old man's skin was like raw clay, and he had a nice mass of gray curls atop his head. He flicked his eyes toward Maddie and said, "I'm hiding from my husband." They stared at each other a split second, then began laughing. When Maddie caught her breath, she told the old man her name, and he offered his, Emmanuel, along with some of what were apparently pomegranate seeds dipped in dark chocolate. She was about to accept when a shadow fell across them. Before she turned around, she could tell it was Jeff by the chill that came over her. Jeff pointedly ignored Maddie and rounded on Emmanuel. You should have the self-respect at your age not to flirt with another man's wife. Maddie stood. He wasn't flirting with me. Jeff cut his eyes at her. Don't act naive. You knew what your little stunt would provoke. Or I have the sense to know a gay man wouldn't. Jeff flushed. Maddie left him to his humiliation, to suffer something for once. Victoria took her medicine. Its sharpness was reminiscent of the way she ached to be loved by Dalen. She gave Melissa the dosage cup when she was done and rested her head in her hands. Exhausted, she asked, Do you think there's any chance Dalen would leave Lucia before she gives birth in 3 months? Melissa squinted for a while, deep in thought. Then suddenly her face lit up. Perhaps if the children weren't his, you could tell Lydia. I was planning to visit Linda today. But what if she doesn't believe me? If she thinks I'm merely scheming, she'd prevent me from contacting him and... Victoria paled. He wouldn't want to see me again. Melissa's gaze shifted. Miss, I have an idea. What? Melissa went to Victoria's side and whispered a few words into her ear. Victoria looked worried. Are you sure? Of course. When the time comes, no one will care who the truth came from. Victoria nodded and lowered her calculating gaze. When they arrived at the house, Victoria went in to look for Linda. Melissa wandered outside. She eventually saw a servant weeding in the distance and walked over to help him. The servant was familiar with Melissa because she was always with Victoria when she visited. He said, Miss, I shouldn't let you help me with this kind of work. I mean, if Miss Victoria marries Dalen, you'd probably help manage the house, and I prefer to be in good standing with my boss. Though she wished fervently for what he said to come true, Melissa blew out her lips, not wanting her eagerness to show, and moved closer to ask, So you've heard then? The servant's brow furrowed. Heard what? It may be nothing but a rumor, so can you promise me you won't tell anyone else? The servant crossed his heart, and Melissa made a show of looking around before she whispered, I heard that Dalen is not the father of Lucia's babies. The servant gaped. Melissa checked her watch and abruptly got up, dusting herself off. Hate to just drop this on you and run, but Miss Victoria said she wouldn't be long, and you know what happens when we keep them waiting. Linda was ready to leave for St. Columban, where she would light candles for Lucia and the twins' continued well-being. Abigail finished tidying up the kitchen and said, Your grandchildren are already blessed with having a grandmother like you. I'll get your shoes. Linda beamed. It's a small thing, but I appreciate you saying that. Put this vase in the foyer when you go. Abigail took a matte black vase with an arrangement of sunburst tulips and California poppy as she headed out. When she was a couple steps from the foyer's threshold, she saw 2 servants conversing in a recess. She went over to reprimand them for slacking off, and the one with their back to her said, Nah, whoever told you that must be mistaken. The other shook his head and retorted, It's not like she would be the first to lie about the father of her children for money. Abigail almost dropped the vase. Its sloshing water alerted the servants to her presence. They both exclaimed, Madame! Abigail turned, realizing Linda had followed her out. Linda's whole body trembled with anger. With a wave of her hand, she dismissed the first servant who'd spoken and asked the other crisply, Who told you that? The servant bowed. Miss Victoria's maid, Melissa, said she heard something. Linda's blood boiled. Victoria was likely the source of the information then, but she hadn't said anything the other day. Why? Abigail cautiously approached Linda, clutching the vase. Madam, I apologize. I'll make sure to do a better job in the future of reining in the servants' gossiping. Linda wasn't convinced. Victoria must have found out something. Why do you say that? Don't forget, Lucia had feelings for Axel in the past, and Victoria is pretty close with Axel. Maybe he confided in her out of guilt. Not to contradict you, madam, but these claims are baseless. Linda ran a hand through her hair, considering. Lucia could do a paternity test. That would be sufficient proof either way. You need a DNA sample from Dalen. Are you sure you want to tell him? I don't. Knowing my son, he'd do something rash. So we'll have to find a way to get it discreetly. All he needs to see are the results. Linda's earlier joy was forgotten. She abandoned her trip out and prayed her son hadn't been deceived. For his reputation's sake and the bloodline, she prayed. In the nursery, Lucia was oblivious to the rumors about her, stroking her stomach as she wondered what it would be like to finally hold her babies, and, consequently, how giving birth would be the scariest thing she'd ever done. She soaked in the space Edward designed, imagining her kids rocking on the matching hand-carved horses in the corner and sleeping soundly beneath the cot's clouds. Subsequently, she stroked the whimsical array of green onesies Dalen picked out at Target earlier. He'd been annoyed when she asked him to take her, and his grumpiness hadn't dissipated the whole drive. But once they were in the store, he was cooperative. This all reminded her she wouldn't be alone, which helped soothe her fear. She eased herself onto an oversized beanbag and, curling up, she closed her eyes. Hours later, Lucia woke to a presence looming over her. Dalen turned a rubber duck over in his hands as he watched her. Sleeping like that can't be good for you. Lucia shrugged. As I've gotten further along in the pregnancy, it's been hard for me to sleep in our bed. Even in the dark, she picked up on the tautness in his jawline and prepared herself to feel anxious. Instead, Dalen knelt and scooped her up. You need to tell me stuff like that. And I need to pay better attention. After saying this, he left. In a while, Lucia took out the wooden horses, examined the instructions, and then began to assemble them. After some time, she finally finished. Done! Lucia laughed. There are 2 of them? Well, it just so happens that each of you will get one, she said to the twins in her stomach. Lucia then began assembling the other one, knowing it would be easier. Halfway through the assembling of the wooden horse, John walked in. Ma'am, Mr. Patrick's mother is here. Lucia was stunned. Linda came? Thinking of the attitude she had taken towards her the last time, she was sure that she had come to see the twins in her womb. Lucia put the unassembled horse to the side and prepared to install it later. She stood up to leave the nursery. Why don't I tell the madam that it is inconvenient for you to come downstairs right now and let her come up? John said. These are her future grandchildren, after all. She should be more respectful of your health than to drop by unannounced. It's okay. She probably thinks that since I'm the younger one, I should be more respectful towards her. In this regard, Lucia was indifferent. There was no need to make Linda feel even more angry towards her. She was careful not to do anything to provoke her mother-in-law. With the support of John, Lucia walked down the stairs and into the living room. Linda was sitting on the sofa, drinking a cup of coffee that had been brought to her. Lucia walked over. Hello, Linda. Linda raised her gaze and glanced at Lucia's stomach, which had grown much bigger than before. She looked away without a comment. Lucia sat down on the sofa, while John stood not far away. Lucia wanted to take the initiative and speak, but she was afraid that Linda might be unhappy, so she just sat there without saying a word. What have you been doing today? Linda had finally spoken up. Working on the nursery? Lucia had a smile on her face as she thought of something. It's almost done. Why don't we take a look together? The design is very dreamy and cute. That's all right. Linda rejected indifferently. Although Lucia was a little taken aback, she did not say much. Oh, okay. Who is the one who thought of the nursery? Linda asked. Dalen. That sounds like him. Overly generous. Linda lowered her gaze indifferently and looked at the coffee in her cup. As long as these are his own children, he will give them anything. Listening to Linda's choice of words, Lucia felt that they were a bit weird. Come to think of it, Linda probably wanted to express her worries. Lucia was probably just thinking too much because of her hormones. Yes, even the layout in the nursery was prepared by Dalen. Linda's expression changed slightly, but she didn't want to continue the topic. She raised her indifferent face and feigned enthusiasm. How about this? Let's go to my place for lunch. You haven't been to my place in a long time. Lucia was surprised by Linda's invitation. Linda didn't like her, and she had always been very clear about it. Maybe now she had compromised for the sake of the twins in her womb. Since you're already here, why don't we eat here? I don't want you to go through too much trouble, Lucia said. Are you concerned about me running around, or do you not want to come to my place? Do you think that if you go to my place, I'll torture you? Linda looked displeased. That's not what I meant, Lucia said hurriedly. I know that we've never had a good relationship, but you're pregnant with my grandsons, Linda said, looking steadily at Lucia's stomach. I'm not going to hurt you. If Lucia were to refuse now, it would mean that Linda would fall out with her. From the looks of it, Linda had specifically come to bring her over for dinner. All right, then. I'll come over, Lucia agreed. John, who had been standing not too far away and didn't want Lucia to agree, immediately stepped forward when he heard Lucia's words. Madame, would you like me to accompany you? Linda's face turned stern. Don't you think that my people can take care of her? John wanted to say something, but Lucia interrupted first. Don't worry, you can stay over here. Linda had brought her there. If something happened to her, it would be Linda's problem. The loss of the first child had been done in secret. Linda would not be so foolish as to do bad things so blatantly again. She knew Linda's scheming after knowing her for such a long time. She definitely wouldn't let Dalen know if she was going to do anything to hurt her. A little while later, Lucia got into the car with Linda. She wanted to liven up the atmosphere and build a good relationship with Linda. However, looking at Linda's expression, it really didn't seem like she was going to bring her to her house for dinner. How about I call Dalen for you? Lucia asked. What's the hurry? Linda's expression was cold. There's no need to rush. You're just coming to my house to eat. It'll be fine. Lucia tried to smile. There was a meaning behind those words that she didn't trust. If something happened at Linda's place, Dalen would know to look there first. Linda acted as if she was innocent and maintained an indifferent expression. Lucia was uneasy after she said that. She just didn't want to be so obvious. But then she couldn't hide her uneasiness when the car stopped in front of the hospital. She stood there unmoving, with a puzzled look on her face. Why did you come to the hospital? Lucia asked. Aren't you going to do a maternity check? I want to know if my grandchildren are well in your belly, Linda said. If you want to know, we can check everything out. Lucia was confused and beginning to panic. Furthermore, this hospital wasn't the one she came to for checkups, and it wasn't the one where she planned to have her delivery. I want to see it for myself. Do you have any objections? Linda asked. It is not that I have any objections, but there's no need. You can see the health of the babies at the next exam. The doctor said that too many tests could affect our health. But what effect would there be if we had more tests? Linda looked at her suspiciously. You can't be feeling guilty and afraid to follow me in, right? Why would I feel guilty? Lucia asked in confusion. Linda cut straight to the point. I want you to take a paternity test. What? Lucia did not expect Linda to have such a goal. Why do you want me to do a paternity test? I have my reasons, and you are under an obligation to dispel that suspicion, Linda said matter-of-factly. Lucia was so angry that Linda was bullying her into this. She didn't know what to do. Linda must have suspected that this was the reason why Linda did such a thing. The children are Dalen's. Lucia didn't need to prove anything to Linda, but she felt she had no choice but to defend herself anyways. Who else could be the father? If you suspect me of adultery, that's pretty insulting. Insulting? Linda seemed to hear something humorous. She sneered at Lucia. I don't think people who like to steal are afraid of being insulted. You like to steal things, but now it seems you prefer to steal people. Everyone knows about you and Axel. Otherwise, without Dalen protecting you, you wouldn't have a job or the respect you do now. Nothing happened between Axel and me. Before Dalen lost his memory, everything was clear to him about where we stood, Lucia said firmly. I counted back to the date when you were possibly pregnant, and you were coincidentally not at the mansion. Instead, you had gone back to your family. That was when Axel went to find you, right? Linda said smugly. Dalen's amnesia made him not want to be with you, so you went to Axel, and then you went to Dalen. Don't think I don't know what you're up to. She pointed at Lucia. I've been leading this family for a long time, and I've seen women like you before. If you admit that you betrayed Dalen, I'll let you go now without any issues. If you don't admit it, the results of the paternity test will prove the children aren't his. So, which will it be? I don't need to think. The children are Dalen's. Lucia felt that even if she swore on the Bible, Linda still wouldn't believe her. Since you were so determined, I guess you'll take the test. Lucia felt extremely helpless. She felt that she could no longer continue to talk to Linda. She wasn't hearing her at all. I want to call Dalen, Lucia said. If I have to do a paternity test, he needs to know. But I believe Dalen would not agree to such an absurd thing. Lucia turned around and left. Linda didn't stop her. If I tell Dalen about Axel going to your family to find you, do you think he will believe you? Lucia halted her steps. Her back was stiff and cold. Would Dalen believe her? His amnesia made him so cruel and uncaring. Not only was Lucia unsure, she was worried. How on earth did Linda know that Axel had been there anyways? It was probably the maid who spread the news. She was really unreliable. However, she couldn't blame her. Linda wasn't someone who was easy to mess with. Whatever she wanted to know about, she would pry the secrets out of someone to know. But right now, it wasn't that she was chasing after the maid who had betrayed her, but rather she was trying to deal with the current situation. Right now, I'm trying to give you a chance. If you don't listen, I'll use a forceful method if I have to. As Linda spoke, a bodyguard suddenly blocked Lucia. Lucia frantically covered her stomach with her hands and was forced back 2 steps. She couldn't possibly win against a strong bodyguard, so she turned to Linda and begged, if I take a paternity test and prove my innocence, then when the children grow up and find out that you suspected they weren't yours, what will they think? Don't worry. If there's no problem with today's paternity test, I can stop other people from talking. They know they may have to pay with their lives if they continue to do so. Linda's words were cold-blooded, but Lucia couldn't back down. Have you forgotten what happened to my first child? Do you really have to do this? Are you threatening me? Linda's arrogance was an impenetrable shield. How could her expression not change when threatened by Lucia? I am speaking the truth. Have you ever thought that if Dalen were to remember you hurt his child, that he may not forgive you for the rest of his life? Do you know why Dalen went to find me and why he stayed with me for the new year? He hated you for drugging me and killing his first child. If it wasn't for him losing his memory, he wouldn't even forgive you right now. Linda was stunned by Lucia's words, and her stern expression became even angrier. Of course she remembered what she did before. It wasn't intentional, but it had killed her first grandchild, Dalen's first child. She'd already known why Dalen didn't return for the new year. But if the children in her stomach weren't Dalen's, then wouldn't the consequences be just as serious? Was Lucia's scheme successful? Since Dalen had lost his memory, she couldn't let it drop. Linda came back to her senses and quickly calmed down. Don't worry, I'm only asking you to do a paternity test. The appointment is with top experts, so it won't harm the children. When Lucia saw Linda's moment of hesitation, she thought she had persuaded her. Unexpectedly, she refused to let her go. Are you going in yourself, or am I going to have to force you? Linda said coldly. In her heart, she had already determined that the children in her womb weren't Dalen's. She was still mostly patient with Lucia because she wanted an outcome. Lucia looked to the side at the nearby road, as if there was someone she knew on their way to save her. She waited with anticipation, but no one came to rescue her after she was forced into the hospital. How could Lucia not do what Linda said? If she hurt the children, she would die of regret. Moreover, there was still some time before the exam. Maybe Dalen would still show up. But nothing of the sort was happening. Inside the examination room, the doctors and nurses were waiting. In front of her, there was a bed and a machine that needed to extract liquid. It was so cold that it made Lucia shiver. Lucia stood there without moving. She wanted to stall for time, as it was an opportunity for her. Why aren't you lying down? What are you waiting for? Someone to save you? Linda asked harshly. Lucia glanced at the female doctor's face, then said to Linda, I can do it, but can I change doctors? Why? Linda had thought that Lucia was up to something again to think that she would raise such a request. Lucia whispered to Linda conspiratorially, She looks so intimidating that I'm afraid she'll scare my babies. Every time I go to the hospital to have my usual checkup, the doctors are really sweet. Linda's face twitched. The doctor's face turned a rich shade of red. No one had ever made such a request. It was simply an insult to her. She was angry, but she didn't say anything. Lucia looked at the infuriated doctor. I'm sorry, I didn't do it on purpose. I had no other choice. If you don't get a new doctor, then I won't cooperate, Lucia said. Even if I did, you wouldn't cooperate with me then either. Linda gestured to the nurses. The nurses immediately stepped forward and held Lucia, one on the left and one on the right, pressing her down on the bed. Let me go! Let go! Lucia struggled, but didn't dare to use too much strength. She still had to take care of the children in her stomach. Linda wouldn't care about that. She no longer believed that the twins were Dalen's. Therefore, Lucia was pressed down onto the bed. Lucia looked at Linda in panic, but she did not give up. Stop it! You will hurt the children this way. If you hurt them, what's the use of proving that they're not Dalen's children in the end? Linda didn't say anything. Please calm down. The extraction of amniotic fluid will not harm the fetuses. Lucia wanted to say something, but Linda coldly said, Do you want me to call Dalen now and have him force you to do this paternity test? He won't. Lucia shook her head helplessly. No, Linda sneered. If he knew how Axel helped, do you think he wouldn't force you? Lucia's body froze in place. On the other side, the nurse immediately started to measure her blood pressure and heart rate. All sorts of preparations were in progress. Lucia was stunned. Linda's words were no longer just a threat because she no longer had any confidence in her. Lucia was thinking which was worse, whether she could accept Linda's coercion or Dalen's anger after her paternity test. It was clear in her heart that she would rather accept Linda's oppression. She didn't do anything that would let Dalen down. She knew who the children belonged to more than anyone else. If she didn't let Linda do the paternity test this time, she would think of more ways to make her compromise in the future. The process of extracting the amniotic fluid was very short. There was no pain, but it was uncomfortable. Tears kept streaming down her face. Linda, who was watching the whole thing, didn't show any trace of being soft-hearted. Moments later, the ordeal was over. The nurse tended to Lucia and made sure she was well enough to leave. As they walked out of the hospital, Lucia said, Can you let me go home now? Didn't I already say that I would bring you to my house for dinner? I'll send you back to your home after dinner." Lucia's eyes narrowed slightly. Linda had a good plan. Lucia didn't say anything as she got into the car and went to her house. Not long after she got there, Dalen did too. Lucia didn't say a word as his tall, oppressive silhouette appeared in front of her. She only hoped that the results of the paternity test would reassure Linda so that no one would mention this matter again. "Just bringing Lucia here for dinner made you nervous enough to come here?" Linda said in a joking tone. "I didn't eat either," Dalen said, as if that was the only reason he was there. "All right, well, I've prepared quite a few dishes," Linda instructed. "Abigail, please start bringing out the meals." "Yes, ma'am," Abigail said. She went into the kitchen and Linda turned around to leave as well. Dalen and Lucia looked at each other. Under his sharp gaze, Lucia turned her head and looked away. Melissa hurried back to Victoria's room. Victoria was fiddling with the flowers and plants. "Mrs. Patrick really took Lucia to the paternity test. Strangely, Lucia agreed to it," Melissa said. "Even if Lucia didn't agree, how could she be stubborn enough to win against her?" Victoria said smugly. "Miss, are you worried? When the time comes, if the children are actually Dalen's, the test will say so." Victoria stood up. After thinking for a moment, she said, "I was just gambling. If the children are Dalen's, then wouldn't a paternity test be a waste? On the contrary, it would be beneficial to Lucia." Although Victoria said that, she was actually very clear about it in her heart. The babies can't be anyone else's. They will only be Dalen's. With her understanding of Axel's personality, she knew he wouldn't ever cheat with Lucia. If he did, how could he be so calm towards her? If that's the case, then Mrs. Patrick won't object to Lucia remaining married to Dalen. "That's right. And then I would never have a chance," Victoria said in a low voice. Melissa's eyes darted around, as if she had suddenly thought of something, walked towards Victoria and said in a low voice, "So, miss, we need to think of a way to look at the paternity test report. If it says they're his children, then we could simply switch it." Victoria turned around and looked at Melissa, as if her idea gave rise to hope. "Who would do such a thing for me?" "Miss, leave this matter to me. I just need to bribe the people in the hospital, and I know how to do that." Victoria took her hand. "You need to be careful." After Melissa left the room, a faint smile appeared on Victoria's face. Even if Dalen were to blame her in the future, it had nothing to do with her. She didn't say or do anything. Meanwhile, Melissa sneaked off to the hospital and headed straight towards the nurses' station. She saw doctors and nurses going in and out, and suddenly she pulled one aside. The nurse was shocked. "What are you doing? Who are you?" "I'm so sorry, but my boss sent me here to see when the results of her paternity test will be ready." "What's the name?" "Lucia Patrick." "Oh, it's her that you've come for." The nurse was the specialist's assistant, and she was present when the paternity test was done. The nurse remembered Lucia because she wanted to avoid a paternity test at all costs. That was because usually there was something shameful that had happened to bring them in. Who would do it for a positive reason? When Melissa heard the nurse say that, she knew it was because she had a bad impression of Lucia. She asked, "Were you there for the test?" "I'm an assistant nurse. The doctor performed the test. If you want to know more, ask them." The nurse turned to go. "Wait!" Melissa immediately called out to her. "If you're the assistant, you can look at the paternity test report, right?" "The doctor won't let me see it. Why do you ask?" "I just want to know the result of that report in advance. Furthermore, if you want to read it, isn't it easy?" Melissa said with a smile. "Why should I look? When the results come out, the doctor will naturally tell the family." "I know, but my boss wants to know first." Melissa looked like she wanted to say something, but hesitated. "You know, she's a little worried." The nurse understood immediately. "I'm sorry, I can't help you." "Don't worry. I wouldn't ask you to help me for nothing, Melissa said as she took out a wad of money from her bag and pressed it into the nurse's hand. The nurse was going to stick to the rules, but when she saw how generous Melissa was, she hesitated. Her boyfriend had lost money gambling and was in debt, so she wanted her to lend him some money. She was just worried that there was nothing she could do, and now the money was basically delivered to her doorstep. Originally, there were many incidents like this in the hospital, so she didn't mind taking part in one now. Sure. Let me find your report and I'll tell you. The nurse agreed to the deal and put the money away. All right, here's my cell phone number. You can make this call once you know it. Melissa took out a piece of paper with her cell phone number on it and gave it to the nurse. The nurse took it. Don't worry. Since I took your money, I will tell you. Thank you. Later that night, Melissa's cell phone rang. Melissa rushed straight in as Victoria was getting ready for bed, making Victoria frown in displeasure. What is wrong with you? Miss, I have some good news for you. What? Victoria didn't know what good news there would be for her. The paternity test has been turned in. Mr. Patrick is not the biological father of Lucia's twins. What did you say? Victoria asked in disbelief. I heard clearly. Lucia's pregnant by someone else, Melissa said triumphantly. She was extremely happy for Victoria. However, Victoria didn't have much of a reaction. In fact, she was too stunned by the result. The children aren't Dalen's? In other words, Lucia had slept with someone else? She didn't think there would be such a reveal, especially without her having to do a single thing to alter the results. Miss, this is great. After Mrs. Patrick knows the truth, Lucia will be thrown out of the family. There was a mocking smile in Victoria's eyes. She was looking forward to it. Lucia was even more conniving than she had imagined, using the children to strengthen her position in the Patrick's family. Although this move was risky, it had a high chance of winning. But whose children were they? Axel's? He was the only guy who was close to Lucia and had possibly had relations with her. What do we need to do next? Melissa asked. Victoria glanced at her. From now on, we don't need to do anything. The expert directly delivered the report of the paternity test to the house. He said nothing as he handed it over to Abigail. He just needed to follow the instructions. He wanted to stay out of the affairs of this rich family. After the expert left, Abigail took the report and went to find Linda. Linda was sitting in the living room reading. Madam, here are the paternity test results. In fact, she was also very nervous, afraid that her boss would be angry with them. Linda held out her hand to take the report and looked at the carefully folded report and covered her nervousness. Something in her still wanted the children to be her own family. When she finally managed to suppress her unstable emotions and opened the list, she saw the words at the bottom right corner. Her face instantly paled, and with a shake of her hand, the paper floated down, landing right beside Abigail's feet. Abigail also had good eyes, and she could easily read the results. She looked at Linda, who threw the book she was holding across the room. Madam, please calm down. Abigail was anxious to comfort her. Sooner or later, my life will be ruined by her, Linda said. I wish she was dead. Linda had not been this angry since Lucia had married Dalen. She had been angry every day since then, but nothing like this. To her, this time, Lucia's actions were unbearable. If you're not happy, just think of a way to make her disappear, but don't hurt yourself, Abigail advised. I'm not doing this for myself. Dalen, how could Dalen not see the kind of woman she is? Does she really need to be injured to be willing to let go? Linda's eyes were filled with tears. If I told him that the children in Lucia's womb are not his, how angry would he be? Would he just accept it? Even an average man from an ordinary family couldn't accept it, let alone Dalen, who was so high and mighty. His dignity and nobility would take a huge hit. If you're thinking about harming her, why don't we just send Lucia away in private? Although the young Mr. Patrick will be anxious, at least he won't be as furious when he knows that the children aren't his. This time, no matter what it takes, I will absolutely not let her off, Linda said with a venomous look. On the other hand, Lucia did not seem to worry about her paternity test at all. When she was done, she settled down in the mansion. Lucia kept looking at the time on her phone. Today was Sunday, and Cole had promised to come and see her. He should arrive at any moment. Just as she was about to call Cole, he appeared in the hall. Lucia saw him and said, "Were you coming here from Timbuktu? What took you so long?" "Hey, I'm here, aren't I?" Cole rolled his eyes and then gently touched her belly. "Oh my God, it's been a while. Your belly's gotten even bigger. How hard is it walking around with this thing?" "Of course it's hard. It's extremely hard." Lucia couldn't help but complain to him. "When are you due?" "Less than 3 months. Feels like forever. I can't go anywhere in the mansion. I'm bored to death. I don't even know what the company looks like anymore." "Don't worry. The company is doing better than before. Things are looking up," Cole said with a smile. "The people there haven't seen me in so long. I can only imagine what they're thinking. What are the rumors looking like?" "You really want to hear it?" "Yes, obviously." Lucia was very curious. "Someone said that you sold the company to the Patricks and then took the money and ran away." Lucia was stunned and asked, "Were they happy when all this was said?" "They were." Lucia was speechless, but still found it hilarious. "I told you to stop holding on to your phone. Aren't you afraid of the radiation?" Cole asked. Lucia looked at the phone in her hand and said, "Don't worry. There is no scientific basis for saying that radiation from televisions and cell phones have any effect on the fetus." "How do you know?" "The doctor said so." Lucia looked at Cole's glowering face and thought of something. She mysteriously smiled and took Cole's hand. "Come on, let's go for a walk." "Whenever I see your smile, I never think it is for a good thing." "Relax. It's a good thing you have something to do." Outside, Lucia looked around and didn't see Spencer, though Spencer had always been elusive. "What are you up to?" Cole asked. "Setting you up with Spencer?" Lucia giggled. Are you kidding me?" "Don't tell me you've never thought about it before." Lucia saw through her expression instantly. Cole's thick-skinned face turned red. He stubbornly said, "I just didn't think about it. I'm here to see you." "Spencer! Spencer! Oh, Spencer!" Lucia shouted at the top of her lungs. "Hey, what are you doing?" Cole looked around anxiously, afraid that Spencer would show up. Unfortunately for him, Spencer didn't let Lucia down. Spencer appeared and walked over. Lucia giggled. "Spencer, Cole has something to say to you. I'm giving you guys a chance to be alone. Do you want to take it?" "Yes," Spencer said honestly. Cole said nothing. Also, when did he say he had something to say to Spencer? Never, that's when. "You guys take your time. I'm going to go back and get some sleep. Otherwise, Dalen will definitely give me the look if he knows I'm not resting." Lucia patted her lips and yawned before walking back. Spencer completely ignored the way Cole stared at him. He seemed calm on the surface, but in reality, his heart was beating so fast it might have burst out of his chest. After arriving at the hall, Lucia found a French window and hid behind a vase that was as tall as her. She was worried about her little intervention and wanted to see how Cole and Spencer got along. She felt that Spencer's game was definitely not as good as Dalen's. When Dalen wanted something, he went after it with a purpose. It was overwhelming, regardless of whether she was willing to do it or not. On the other hand, Spencer was like an icicle with an emotionless face. He wasn't afraid of freezing the other person up. Lucia noticed that Cole liked these kinds of people. Jeff, who used to be gloomy, and now Spencer, who was cold, both shared this characteristic. Why does there have to be a barrier in every way? Lucia muttered. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't get a clear glimpse of Spencer and Cole. However, thinking about it, if she couldn't see here, she could go upstairs to get a better view. Just as she was about to lift her foot and head upstairs, a low voice came from behind. Who allowed you to go upstairs alone? Lucia froze for a moment, then turned to see Dalen standing behind her. She pouted and said, Don't worry. Nothing will happen to me just by walking up some stairs. I don't care any less about my children than you do. After she finished speaking, Lucia held onto the railing with one hand and prepared to go upstairs. However, before she could take the first step, her body lightened and she found herself being lifted up. She looked at Dalen's cold and sharp face with dissatisfaction. What are you doing? I said I could go on my own. Don't be responsible for injuring my son. Lucia was annoyed. How do you know it's a son? Maybe it's a daughter. Are you valuing a son over a daughter? Dalen ignored her and carried her upstairs. He held her firmly, not even changing his expression. Lucia had wanted to say that she was pregnant with twins and would weigh a lot more than before. It would have been better to let her down. However, Dalen could lift the heavy sofa with one hand, and he was using both hands right now. Besides, even if she was pregnant with twins, she would still be much lighter than the sofa. Lucia was held firmly in his embrace, and she could clearly feel the strong muscles of his arms. She didn't have to worry about falling down. However, the hand on her shoulder didn't want to let go. It had a touch that made her feel nostalgic. With a slight sway, her thoughts drifted back to the past. At that time, she was also pregnant, so Dalen carried her upstairs and downstairs. Now, even though it was the first time she was carried upstairs after her pregnancy, Lucia still had a lot of feelings for him. Dalen, do you prefer your children to be girls or boys? Lucia wanted to know what Dalen was thinking after he lost his memory. Would the answer he said be the same before he'd lost his memories? Dalen's black eyes moved slightly. He opened his mouth for a moment and said, Up to you. What kind of answer is that? I asked for your opinion, not mine. Lucia was none too satisfied with his answer. Do you wish for me to be patriarchal, or a man who values girls? Dalen lowered his eyebrows and his gaze landed on her face and his arms. As long as it's mine, I'm okay. Dalen's sharp gaze swept towards her. What's with that look? What look? Lucia's face turned red. Dalen did not say anything. He stared at Lucia's flushed face and his black eyes became slightly absent-minded. Dalen continued on, carrying Lucia all the way back to her room. When her feet were placed on the ground, Lucia barely registered where she was. Her mind was still replaying her interaction with Dalen. She stood there now completely dazed and sluggish, like an elk lost in the forest. I heard when a woman's pregnant, her IQ drops. If yours were to lower again, you'd be very stupid, Dalen said, staring at her. It was as if he was very interested in foolish women. Nonetheless, Lucia was annoyed when she heard that. What kind of thing to say is that? How am I stupid? My pregnancy has no bearing on my intelligence. She didn't seem confident when she said that. Her eyes flickered because Dalen, who was standing in front of her, was so intimidating that she couldn't stand it anymore. Just as she finished her sentence, she saw Dalen's figure walking towards her. Lucia's heart was beating rapidly. What are you doing? I'm telling you, we shouldn't do anything reckless. The doctor said I've got to take it easy. What did I do to you? Dalen asked. His voice was low, with a sexy husk. Lucia could feel the temperature of her entire face rising. When she tried to step back, he grabbed her waist. Her thick waist was not the same as it was before she was pregnant. Being hugged so intimately made Lucia feel a little uncomfortable. However, when Dalen pressed his face down, the temperature of her body became even hotter. That man. Ugh! Before Dalen could say anything, Lucia's mouth was already sealed in a kiss. Lucia's brain felt like it had turned to mush at that moment. She could not even remember the reason why she came upstairs. Not to mention being kissed by Dalen to the point where she couldn't tell the difference between north, south, east, and west. Afterwards, when Lucia came downstairs, she saw Claude left without anyone noticing. Only then did she remember what she had been doing upstairs. She had been intimate with Dalen countless times. Why was she still not used to it? Was it because Dalen was like a wild beast even when he kissed her? The next day, Dalen went to his family, and Lucia was alone in the nursery. She had put together the 2 small wooden horses and placed them on the decorative table. With a gentle tap of a finger on the top, the little wooden horse just rocked back and forth, and it would never cease unless you stopped it with your hand. There was a knock on the door as John walked in. "Young madame, Mrs. Patrick has arrived." Lucia turned around and saw Linda walking in. She thought she was staying downstairs. Who would have thought that she would actually come to the nursery herself? "Hello." This was the first time she saw Linda after her paternity test. Lucia couldn't help but pay close attention to Linda's expression. However, there was no trace of happiness or anger on her face. Linda didn't reply to her. She only looked around the nursery, then looked at Lucia uninterestedly. "Which room are you sleeping in?" "In the master bedroom." "I remember you used to sleep in a room alone." "Yes." Lucia didn't know why Linda asked this. "Let me take a look." Lucia was curious about Linda's actions, but she wanted to take a look at the room and she wasn't going to stop her, so she took her with her. After they entered the room, Linda said, "Close the door." Lucia didn't think that could mean anything good. She closed the door, keeping John and the other maids out of the room. Lucia turned around and saw Linda throw a document on the tea table. Lucia walked over and saw the words "results" written on the cover. Were these the paternity test results? Shouldn't this be a good thing? But that's not right. Since she'd arrived, Linda had had such a bad expression and attitude. Logically speaking, Linda should have been very good to her after seeing the results. Could it be? Lucia thought about what could have happened and her face turned slightly pale. She just stood there, frozen and silent. After a long while, she propped herself up with her hands on her waist and picked up the document from the tea table. She calmed down and took a few deep breaths before she opened it. When she saw the results, Lucia's heart sank and her breathing became unstable. That's impossible." Linda followed her coldly. "Impossible? Can't you see the black and white? Do I need to read it to you? The child belongs to Dalen. Whether it was Dalen's or not, was she not clear about that? From beginning to end, Dalen was the only one she had. Could the hospital's test results be fake?" Linda was heartbroken. "I wish the child in your womb was Dalen's even more than you do. At least I won't let him know what kind of disgusting woman he's married to." Lucia looked at Linda's face with disgust and disdain before looking at the test report in her hands. There was nothing wrong with her eyes, yet she thought it had to be an illusion. She closed her eyes and tried to calm down. However, no matter how calm she tried to be, her words were still trembling. "I don't believe this report. The hospital must have made a mistake. It's not possible." "Then you think I don't want my own grandchildren anymore?" Lucia couldn't say a word. Linda was right. She may dislike her, but she definitely wouldn't dislike her own grandchildren. Just like in the beginning, Linda's attitude toward her pregnancy had changed. If she really didn't like her, she wouldn't have revealed the truth only now. However, how could she admit that the paternity test was real? How could she accept the hospital's testing without issue? What was going on? "Don't pretend to be innocent in front of me. I came looking for you directly instead of Dalen because I didn't want Dalen to suffer such a blow. I will only give you 3 days. After 3 days, I want you gone from here, as if you never existed." Otherwise, I will show this report to Dalen myself. Linda took the report from Lucia's hand, put it into her purse, and left the room. Lucia stood there frozen in place. She wondered where the report had come from. She definitely wouldn't believe that it was her report. The child was Dalen's. After Linda had left, John hurriedly ran in to check on Lucia. When he noticed that Lucia's expression was strange, he hurriedly asked, "Are you all right?" Stunned, Lucia looked back at John's anxious face. She shook her head slowly and said, "It's nothing. I'm fine." But what was that look on John's face? "No matter what you see, don't tell Dalen." "If Mrs. Patrick is bullying you, shouldn't you tell Mr. Dalen? When she bullies you, she's bullying your children as well. With that being the case, Mr. Dalen would definitely help you," John said seriously. "Who said she bullied me? Does it look like I'm being bullied?" "In the past, Mrs. Patrick has bullied you, yet you didn't say anything and caused Mr. Patrick to misunderstand you, which only led to you suffering more." I know you're worried about me, worried that things will turn out the same as before. But I promise you I'll be fine, and so will my children." "Really?" John was worried. "I already promised you, yet you're still worried." John's sincerity made Lucia feel warmth, but also gave her a heartache. "Can you get me something to eat? I'm starving." "Right away." Hearing Lucia's words, John's heart slightly calmed down. Perhaps he was just overthinking things. After all, the children were already so far along, and Lucia's diet had always been good, so there definitely wouldn't be a problem. Furthermore, if there was a problem, how could Mr. Dalen not know about it? John left the room. Lucia sat down on the sofa. She was sure there was a problem with the report. The key was, if Linda showed it to Dalen, would Dalen believe her? Would he be furious the moment he saw the results of the paternity test? Would he lose his mind enough to directly harm her and her children? After seeing that result, would Dalen still have the sense to do another paternity test? Lucia would be very careful. She didn't dare to take the risk because the chances of her winning were so small. Did Dalen have it in him to believe in her instead of science? Wasn't the detailed data more reliable than her words? She only had 3 days. What could she do? How could she get herself through this crisis? She could tell Dalen that she wanted to take a paternity test. As long as the result was different from Linda's, she would be safe. But what if it was the same? Although Lucia didn't know why it turned out this way, it was the invisible plan that was the most dangerous. Who could be the one trying to frame her? Victoria? Robert? She could only think of those two. They were always harboring evil intentions. Away in the side hall, Robert asked in disbelief, "Are you sure?" Victoria nodded her head. "I am sure that the twins in Lucia's womb are not Dalen's. That expert ran the paternity test personally." "That's great. I was worried that Dalen would have an heir. Now I'm afraid that will not be the case." Robert grinned. "All this time I've been thinking about how I could get rid of the children in Lucia's stomach, when it turns out there's no need. When they're born, I want to see the look on Dalen's face." "Fate is still biased towards you," Victoria said. Robert turned around with a relaxed and happy smile and said, "Now we have to find a way for you to marry Dalen." Victoria looked slightly depressed. "That is my wish." "Then work hard for your wish. You have the ability to do so." After dinner, Robert called Axel into the study room. The moment he entered, Robert looked at Axel with a peculiar expression. That sharp gaze seemed to want to see Axel's heart clearly. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Axel asked calmly. "Do you want to know something? The children in Lucia's womb have been tested for parenthood." "Why would she need a paternity test? Did my cousin ask to do it?" Axel asked in confusion. "No, Linda wanted to keep Dalen out of it." "Is there a problem?" "That's what I'm curious about. If Lucia's child isn't Dalen's, whose would it be?" Robert looked at Axel with a sharp gaze and asked the question that was on Axel's mind. Are it yours? Axel raised his eyes and looked at Robert. Why would you think that? Other than Dalen, who else could it be? They're not mine. Robert believed that Axel would not lie to him. The point was, he was not suspicious at all when he heard what he said. However, if it wasn't Dalen or Axel, who else could it be? Could it be Spencer's? Axel's eyes flashed with a cold light that disappeared in the blink of an eye. He said, Is this important? How is it not important? Without Spencer by Dalen's side, it would be the equivalent to losing his right hand, which would eliminate a major threat to us. Him? No rush. Axel looked indifferent, as if he was just saying it out loud. Robert thought Axel could give him advice, so he asked thoughtfully, You have a way? Axel didn't answer his question. Instead, he asked something else. Does my brother know the truth about the results? Our whole family knows about this. Presumably, only Dalen doesn't. I don't intend to tell him either. It will be even more entertaining when the twins are born. Robert had a malicious smile on his face. On the contrary, Axel didn't have any expression on his face. However, his eyes darkened, concealing his emotions. Lucia was sitting on the sofa with a book in her hands. When Dalen came in, he saw that her eyes were sore and she was rubbing them. Lucia was still massaging her eyes when the book was taken out of her hands. Do you have time to read? Dalen's gaze was deep and cold. He didn't look good anyway. I momentarily forgot the time. Reading really is better than watching TV, isn't it? Lucia had a smile on her face, like an innocent young girl. Dalen took the book and turned around towards his bedroom. Wait a moment, Dalen, Lucia called to him. Dalen turned around and saw Lucia holding out her hand as she looked at Dalen with an obvious look. You have to help me. I can't get up. Dalen's thin lips were cold and stiff. He walked forward expressionlessly and held her soft, bony little hand, slightly exerting some of his strength. It was only then that Lucia was able to stand up. As she stood up, she raised her head to look up at Dalen. Lucia looked at Dalen's handsome face. Every part of his face was as perfect as a god's axe, containing equal parts sexiness and tyranny. It held a cold expression. The corner of Lucia's mouth raised into a sweet smile. Then she raised out her hand to grab Dalen's neck, lifted her head up, and kissed his lips. His thin lips softened. Dalen stared at her with his black eyes and said in a low and hoarse voice, Are you trying to seduce me? No, I just wanted to give you a sweet taste, Lucia giggled. What's wrong? Aren't you happy? You kiss me every time and you don't say hello. I learned it from you. A sweet like this, I'll be sure to give you more in the future, Dalen said. I look forward to it, Lucia replied, burying her head in Dalen's chest. Dalen retracted his gaze. In his black eyes was the head nestling against his chest. Lucia closed her eyes. She couldn't bear to part with Dalen, but if she didn't, then the children would be the ones to get hurt. She knew it wasn't Dalen's intention to hurt the children, but now that he lost his memory, he didn't even know how serious it was. Lucia knew it wasn't Dalen's fault that he'd lost his memory, so even if she was getting hurt again and again, she would have to leave. But now she really wanted to tell Dalen that she couldn't hold on any longer. Mom was here today? You ask even though you know the answer. Lucia raised her head and looked at the firm chin that was just inches away from her. She really wanted to take a good look at him. What did she say? Dalen lowered his gaze and looked at her. Nothing. Lucia smirked, her eyes brimming with vibrant colors. What did you want her to say? She was here to see your grandchildren. After a while, they left. Lucia still didn't say anything to Dalen. Maybe he sensed something, or maybe he didn't feel anything. In short, she no longer had the confidence to say anything to Dalen. She didn't dare mention the paternity test. She only wanted to protect her children now. As for Dalen, she had her guard up and was wary of him. To Lucia, these 3 days were like 3 seconds. Her mind was a mess. She had to face all this alone. She didn't dare tell anyone, not even Cole. It just wasn't safe. There were still 3 months until the twins were born. Would there be an accident? 3 months was a long time for her. It was unknown when the danger would descend upon her. Lucia thought she could escape from Dalen and hide for 3 months. As long as she was able to hide away for 3 months and safely give birth to her children, she would no longer be afraid of anything. However, how could she avoid Dalen's search, especially with his wealth and resources? If she were to be captured and he found out about the paternity test, wouldn't she feel guilty and die out of guilt? Not to mention, Dalen almost certainly felt that something was amiss. But it was impossible for her to sit still and wait for death. What if she succeeded in her escape? Therefore, she had to plan carefully. First of all, if she wanted to escape, she needed money. Cash was important, because if she used her card, Dalen could lock down her location within a second. She couldn't ask anyone to withdraw money for her, because Dalen only needed to check and he would find out who it was that was helping her. If that happened, wouldn't she be harming others? When she lay in bed at night, Lucia lay flat on her back and turned her head to look at Dalen. Her body wanted to flip over, but she couldn't. Dalen opened his eyes. His black pupils were filled with an intimidating light. With a slight push, he helped her turn over. "Dalen, can you give me some money?" Lucia asked as she snuggled up to Dalen. She noticed that Dalen was staring at her without saying a word, so she quickly explained, "Cole's birthday is coming up soon, and I want to give him a great present. After thinking about it, I feel like cash would be best." Dalen closed his eyes. "How much?" "A few hundred or so." "I'll have someone transfer it to you." No. I wanted to give him the cash directly, to surprise him." "It's fine if you don't want to. I can go out and get the money myself. I have money anyway, so I don't need to ask you for it," Lucia said seriously. Dalen's face was dark, and he didn't say anything. "Dalen, can you do it?" Lucia tugged on his arm. "I said that if you can't do it, I'll go out and get it myself." "Sleep." Lucia bit her lips and glared at him. Stingy. Lucia wanted to roll over and sleep with her back facing him. However, when she wanted to turn around in frustration, she found that she was unable to do so. Helpless, she could only place the back of her hand on her face and cover her eyes. The next day, Lucia was sitting in the living room, eating fruit and watching TV. A silver box dropped down beside her, causing her to freeze for a moment. She raised her head and saw Dalen, who had appeared in front of her. "What is this?" Lucia asked, puzzled. With a clicking sound, the silver chest was opened. Lucia was stunned by the money inside. Then she thought of something and asked, "Is this the cash you're giving me? I didn't need this much." When the time comes, would she be able to take the box and run? Wouldn't that just stir up the rumor mill even more? Those who didn't know would think that was all she'd been after all along. If Dalen knew what she was thinking, would he punish her? "It's fine. You don't even have pocket money usually anyway," Dalen said. "I don't need this much to pay for the journey." "Since you might be using up all the money in it already, I'll put the money in again. You can treat it as your treasure-gathering pot." "I don't need this much to pay for the journey," she thought again. "You can ask me for money anytime." "I really don't need this much to pay for the trip." This thought kept circling her mind. After Dalen turned around and left, Lucia stretched out her hand to look through the stack of money in the box. There were several $1,000s here. When the time came, she would just take out a few hundred or so from the bottom and leave the rest. Dalen wouldn't notice. That night, she woke up Dalen. "Dalen, I want to go to the company tomorrow to take a look." "It's not going out of business." Of course I know it's not going out of business. I'm preparing to escape. Lucia took the initiative to snuggle up close to Dalen. Although she didn't know why she would want to wake up in Dalen's embrace every morning, she was completely frozen in place. But she felt sure that it was because she had unconsciously sought safety in her sleep that she felt this way. Dalen didn't push her away because he felt sorry for her. Now that she was awake and close to him, Dalen probably wouldn't refuse. Lucia touched Dalen's arm and said, "I just want to see the company. Will you promise me?" "No." "What does it matter? I'll be careful." "There's nothing to discuss." "Dalen." "Shut up." "I won't." "Just this once. And after I go once, I'll stay here in the house and wait for the babies to come." Lucia was still arguing on her behalf when her mouth was suddenly blocked by his hands. She wanted to struggle, but she couldn't win against Dalen. He was, of course, much stronger than her. When Dalen finally lifted his hands, she was almost unable to say anything. She didn't dare to say anything else, as she was afraid that if Dalen suppressed her again, she would really die. The next day, when Lucia was headed for the front door, she was stopped by John. Ever since she became pregnant, she had never gone out, except for the pregnancy test and the time Linda took her out for the paternity testing. On one hand, she didn't really want to go out. But on the other hand, Dalen didn't want to let her out. Actually, she didn't really want to go out right now. Last night with Dalen and today's plan to go out was just an act. The day she really wanted to leave the house was not today. "Mrs. Lucia, you can't go out. If Mr. Dalen finds out, he'll be angry," John advised. "Why wouldn't he let me out? I'm just going to visit the company." "But with your delivery date soon, going out is very dangerous." "I'll be careful." "But there is always a chance. Forget about Mr. Dalen disagreeing. I wouldn't even dare let you." John didn't know why Lucia would suddenly go out. Lucia pretended to be angry, turned around and went straight back to her room. When Dalen returned in the afternoon, John immediately approached him and said, "Mr. Dalen, Mrs. Lucia is not in a good mood." Better to comfort. These were the words in John's heart. Dalen's black eyes twitched and his expression turned stern. "She wanted to go out, but I dissuaded her," John said, explaining why Lucia was angry. Lucia sat on the sofa beside the French window in the living room. She held a book in her hands, but her gaze was focused on the window outside. She was upset. She didn't move, even after Dalen walked in. She continued to look out of the window. Dalen walked over, his tall figure emanating an oppressive aura. "You want to go out?" Lucia turned around and looked at Dalen with grievance. "The doctor said your mood when you're pregnant is very important. If your mood is not good, you can slip into prenatal depression." He really couldn't see that she was in a bad mood. He could only see that she was being petty towards him. However, Dalen didn't get angry. Instead, he felt that she was cute. "I'll take you out tonight." Dalen turned around and took off his jacket. "Tonight?" Lucia asked in surprise. She was so agitated that she wanted to stand up, but she was weighed down by her big belly to the point that she was unable to do so. She tried several times, but to no avail. Just as she gave up, a force pulled her up. It was as if an endless amount of internal energy had poured into her body, causing her to become light and graceful. Seeing Dalen pull her up, she smiled. "Dalen, tonight? Is the company off work tonight?" "You want to be seen like this?" Not only that, Lucia thought. She didn't want to go to the company right now either. Not really. She was just saying that. She didn't really mean it. She didn't know that Dalen would agree so readily. Dalen turned around and walked into the cloakroom without saying another word. Lucia also followed him into the cloakroom. When she saw Dalen was taking off his clothes and was about to reveal his robust physique, she immediately left the cloakroom. Soon after, Dalen walked out of the bathroom wearing only a bathrobe. Lucia then raised her head. Dalen went to all the trouble of taking a bath and changing his clothes? Then should she change her clothes as well? Lucia walked into the cloakroom and looked at her maternity clothes. She couldn't help but sigh. No matter how beautiful the maternity dress was, it was still a maternity dress. Her slim and beautiful dresses could not be worn. She didn't need to shower. She could just change her clothes. After hesitating for a while, she finally chose a pink maternity dress. It was the kind of pink dress that looked very pretty. Dalen, who just took off his home clothes and hadn't yet put on his shirt, came in. Lucia trembled in fright. The dress in her hands fell to the ground. Shit! She couldn't bend at all. She couldn't pick it up. At this time, how could she care about the dress on the ground? Lucia immediately turned around. The curve of her back was perfect. From the back, it looked like she wasn't pregnant at all. Dalen's gaze fell on Lucia. Under his gaze, Lucia became shy at a speed that could be seen with the naked eye. A hint of pink stained her ears, a pink not unlike the color of the dress that he picked up off the ground. Lucia had her back facing him, and her head was lowered. She couldn't see what was happening behind her, and the silence made her very nervous and shy. She unconsciously raised her gaze and saw his figure in the mirror in front of her. She noticed that Dalen was holding her pink dress and staring at her with a sense of aggression, like a beast wanting to bite her neck and drink blood. "Give it to me." Lucia stretched out her hand and grabbed her dress. With her back facing Dalen, she put it on quickly. It was hard to cover her nervousness. After getting dressed, she didn't look at Dalen. Dalen was now fully dressed. The heat emanating from his body was oppressive. If she didn't get out, she would be roasted. After Lucia left, Dalen took a deep breath. He didn't even do anything, yet he already had such a huge reaction. This feeling of being controlled caused him to feel very frustrated in his heart, and he also felt a sense of evil. Then he turned and walked out of the cloakroom. By the time they left, it was already dark. At the Chamber of Commerce's banquet, all the executives were present. However, Dalen's appearance still caused quite a sensation. This was because it was usually Mark Leland who appeared on behalf of the Patricks. Now that Dalen had personally appeared, how could there not be a commotion? His appearance alone was surprising enough, not to mention the fact that he had a woman by his side, especially a pregnant woman. Lucia wondered if she could escape at this moment. Why did she go to a party instead of her company?
"It's really surprising that Mr. Patrick came to the Chamber of Commerce for the banquet. The entire hall is filled with honorable guests."
The president of the Merchant Guild stepped forward and shook hands. Dalen stretched out his hand to meet him. Lucia couldn't help but be drawn over. It was the first time that she saw Dalen's demeanor on such an occasion. She felt her heart beating wildly. He was dressed in a black suit, standing tall and straight, but he couldn't suppress the cold and sharp aura of a king.
"This is..."
The president turned his attention. Dalen's gaze fell on Lucia's uneasy face. Could she disappear on the spot? Lucia thought to herself. Could she just run away from the midst of the crowd? Obviously not. He didn't know what was in her heart. Perhaps it was because Dalen had never admitted her identity, or maybe he was afraid that Dalen would say something to demean her. She rushed to Dalen and said, "I'm like his sister. He's my brother."
"Ah, so it's Miss Victoria. Pleasure to meet you,"
the guild leader smiled. Lucia almost bit her tongue to pieces. If she knew earlier, she would have let Dalen say it. Dalen's sister was Victoria? The president didn't know what the situation was, but after she said those words, he felt Dalen's aura being blown around like a cold wind, making him feel anxious. The guild leader was an observant person. He knew that he had said something wrong. Could it be that this person wasn't Victoria? He heard that Miss Victoria was weak, but the lady in front of him looked to be quite strong, with a ruddy complexion and full of energy. She did not look weak at all. Just when he was at a loss as to what to do, someone beside him handed him a glass of wine. The president immediately took it and personally handed it to Dalen. Dalen didn't move. This filled the entire banquet with tension. When his nervousness reached its peak, Dalen raised his hand, took the glass of wine, and took a sip. Only then did the tension ease a little. Lucia, who was standing to the side, was also personally served a fruit drink that was as healthy as for any VP. Lucia drank her juice in silence. She thought that Dalen probably wouldn't mind her being called Victoria by others. In Dalen's heart, Victoria was always more important than him. If it weren't for her being pregnant, Dalen wouldn't have brought her here. If she followed Dalen, his image would naturally be honorable. However, it was not hard to imagine other people's guesses. With a woman, a pregnant woman. This woman is Dalen's woman? This child is Dalen's child? But Dalen isn't married? Why did he bring her out so blatantly? Fortunately, Lucia stayed by Dalen's side, so no one else had the opportunity to ask her anything. Just as she thought that, Dalen left. Lucia was about to call for him, but she stopped herself. What was Dalen doing, leaving her alone? Just when Lucia was thinking about how she would react if someone came to talk to her, she saw Dalen come over with a plate of food in his hands. When Lucia saw the food, she was stunned. "You got me something to eat?" True, they had not eaten dinner yet. She'd followed Dalen the whole time and didn't go anywhere. Naturally, she hadn't eaten anything either, and neither had Dalen. In the dining area, the two of them sat down and ate opposite each other. Lucia was really hungry, so she buried her head in her food. Dalen ate a bit and drank from his glass. Two women nearby looked towards the dining area from time to time, whispering to each other. "Who is she? Dalen hasn't taken his eyes off her the entire time. I got all dressed up for this and didn't expect him to not even look at me." "Not only you, other than her, has he even looked at anyone else? If he told you she was his little sister, would you believe it?" "Definitely not. When the president said Victoria, something was obviously off." "Is she a lover?" "Is she? I thought Dalen was single, and there's no need to bring a lover to such an important occasion, right? Let alone one with a child." Dalen is indeed an enigmatic man, and so is the woman beside him. Lucia ended up with half a glass of juice. She looked across from her and noticed Dalen had barely touched his food. "Is it not to your liking?" "No," Dalen replied plainly and looked away. Could he not say that he was just watching Lucia eat and that he had lost all interest in the food in front of him? "When we get back, I'll ask the kitchen to prepare some food for you." Lucia was very considerate when it came to Dalen's matters. She couldn't just fill her own stomach and ignore him. After Lucia finished her meal, she left the venue with Dalen. They were the first to leave. After they got in the car, Lucia reminded Dalen, "Why did you bring me here? So that tomorrow everyone will know about us?" "Nope." Dalen's expression was calm. "Why then?" "I don't dare." Lucia was speechless. This was true. No one dared to do so either, unless Dalen ordered it. When they were about to reach the mansion, Lucia asked, "Dalen, let's get off here, okay? It would be nice to walk around." Dalen's expression did not change. Lucia pulled Dalen's index finger and shook it a little like a spoiled child. "Let's take a walk. I've eaten too much." He'd been watching. Why had he let her eat so much? Still, he knocked on the window. The car stopped on the road. They didn't even have to pull off to the side. Because this road was private, they didn't have to worry about other cars coming. The wide road, the street lamps, the shadows of trees. The bright moon was high in the sky and the stars were clear. The wind blew cool air on Dalen's face. Lucia retracted her gaze from the sky, looked at him and asked, "Isn't it nice to walk like this?" He didn't say anything. Lucia looked down at Dalen's hand and imagined the feeling of being wrapped tightly. Thinking of this, she extended her hand and entwined it with his. Dalen frowned slightly as he held her hand. Lucia had a smile on her face, but her heart was aching. "Dalen, if you knew I was leaving you, would you still treat me like this? I don't want to leave you, but I don't know if you'll believe me. Believe that the paternity test is real." If you don't believe me, what sort of danger does that put me and the baby in? Just by holding Lucia's hand, Dalen seemed to feel the change in Lucia's mood. Turning around, he looked down at Lucia, who had her head lowered as if she was thinking of something. Lucia sensed it. She lifted her face and was stunned when she was met by Dalen's unfathomable black eyes. She then raised her head with a smile. On the afternoon of the third day, Lucia's cell phone rang. It was Linda. "Have you made up your mind?" Lucia held her phone to her ear and stared blankly out of the French window as she said, "I want to do another paternity test." "What are you trying to do here? Is this your attempt at stalling for time?" "Me? Stalling? What would I need to stall for?" "Don't try to be clever. It's useless. I just want to know if you've made up your mind." Linda's tone was strict. "Just leave me alone already. I'm telling you, the baby is his," Lucia pleaded. Linda's expression was extremely ugly. "In other words, you don't want to leave Dalen?" "Very well. Today is the deadline. I'm not one to bluff. I'll call Dalen and ask him to come here." "Please." Lucia still wanted to say something, but the phone had already hung up. She was completely flustered. What should she do? What would happen if Dalen found out? At that moment, the children in her stomach suddenly flipped, scaring her so much that her face turned white. Was that a sign? Could it be that even the children felt insecure? Lucia held her stomach in both hands in fear, stroking it over and over, trying to comfort the panicking twins. After Linda hung up the phone, she was furious. It looked like this was what she had to do. She gave Lucia a chance first because she didn't want anything to happen to her. Wasn't it good to be far away with her children? I didn't expect her to be so unappreciative. She suppressed her anger and called Dalen. Just as the call ended, Victoria came over. "Victoria," Linda called out to her. Victoria saw the dark expression on Linda's face and hurried over. "What's wrong?" "What else could make me so angry other than Lucia?" "What do you mean? She is pregnant with Dalen's kids." Victoria's eyes flashed. Linda looked at Victoria with a sharp gaze. "Victoria, even if you knew that something was wrong with Lucia, you still wouldn't tell me, would you?" I don't know what you're talking about." Victoria looked as if she couldn't bear to face her as she lowered her gaze. "Don't bother, I already know. Lucia's children are not Dalen's, so there's no point in you hiding it from me." If it wasn't for the maid beside Victoria who was blabbering on, she wouldn't have suspected Lucia at all. "There must be some kind of misunderstanding. How could Lucia's kids not belong to Dalen?" "It may have been a rumor before, but I did the paternity test. I know." Seeing Linda so angry that she was gasping for breath, Victoria hurriedly grabbed her some tea. "Aunt, calm down. If that truly is the case, then I have nothing else to say. However, since things have come to this, we can only go and resolve it." "If only Dalen had married you instead back then, there wouldn't be all this trouble," Linda said regretfully. "As long as Dalen wants me, I will wait for him." Victoria expressed her sincerity. "This must be resolved first. No matter what, I will make Dalen marry you." Linda was extremely dissatisfied with Lucia. Victoria was much more gentle and demure than she was. "Where is Lucia now?" Victoria asked, puzzled. "I just called Dalen. I want to show him the results of the paternity test. Even if it's heart-piercing, he has to know, as long as he knows that Lucia betrayed him." Victoria had not expected her arrival to be so coincidental. How long had it been since she last saw Dalen? About half an hour later, Dalen arrived in the room. Seeing Dalen's tall figure enter, she immediately stood up and went forward. "Dalen, you're here? I just got here not too long ago. If I'd known you were coming, I would have come earlier." "Are you feeling better?" Dalen looked at her. "I feel much better. Thank you for your concern." Dalen nodded slightly. He sat down on the sofa and asked Linda, "What's the matter?" "Dalen, there are some things I need to tell you," said Linda. She hoped he was mentally prepared for the news, but she believed in her heart that Patrick's weren't weak, especially Dalen. Dalen took a sip of the tea in front of him. Victoria, who was standing not far behind him, turned on her phone and picked it up slightly. The call she made was, of course, to Lucia. Lucia was outside the room. As soon as her phone rang, she answered. Then Dalen's question came from inside. "What is it?" Lucia was confused. It wasn't Dalen's number, right? She had Dalen's number. Then who was this? It was only when she thought about it for a moment that she realized it was Victoria's number. Victoria was using this method to provoke her again? Obviously, Dalen was with Victoria right now. What does this mean? Was he always with Victoria in the daytime behind her back? Just as she was about to put down the phone, depressed, she heard Linda's voice from inside the room. "I have the results of the paternity test." With that, Linda gave a meaningful glance to Abigail. Abigail immediately went to get the paternity test report. Lucia was so frightened that her entire body went limp and she started to tremble. Linda really was going to show Dalen the results of the paternity test. Abigail handed the paternity test to Dalen. Dalen's face did not show any expression as he received the paternity test report. Spencer, who was standing at the edge of the room, watched the proceedings. If there was no problem with the result, why was there a need to show it to Dalen? Spencer still couldn't believe it. What could possibly be wrong with the children in Lucia's womb? However, if such a report was really read by Dalen, and the results weren't what he was expecting, then the consequences would be, well, how serious could they be? Dalen opened the paternity test and looked at the name and the results. His eyes were focused, and one could not see the emotions within them. However, there was no need to think too much about it. The atmosphere had quickly turned bad, as if it was the calm before a storm. "I took a sample of your DNA from a water glass to a lab. Then a sample was drawn from Lucia's amniotic fluid. This is the result of the tests." Even through the phone, Lucia could feel the terrifying mood spreading. Her hand holding the phone trembled nonstop. Her face paled. Dalen had clearly seen it. "Did you show it to her?" Dalen's voice was very low and heavy. There was no anger in him, yet. Lucia knew that this was merely what preceded one of his tantrums. She saw it, and she wouldn't admit it was true. What's the use of her not admitting anything? The results are very clear, so it's not up to her, Linda said. Hearing that, Victoria immediately took a few steps forward to speak up for Lucia. "I don't think Lucia did it on purpose. She has definitely had her own difficulties. Why don't you just spare her? Just throw her out of the house, but don't hurt her and the children in her womb. After all, she has been with you for so long. You should have some pity on her." Victoria's words only made Lucia's heart turn cold. Why was she saying good words about her? This was adding fuel to the fire. Just when she felt herself began to feel angry, she heard Dalen's low and terrifying voice. "Spencer, bring her here." Lucia trembled in fright. Her phone finally slipped out of her hand. Dalen didn't believe her. If he didn't believe the report, why would he let Spencer bring her there? And what would happen if he did? Lucia no longer dared to imagine it. It was now happening. On the other side of the phone, when Spencer heard Dalen's words, his face changed. "Sir, this matter needs to be investigated." Dalen looked at Spencer with his cold, fierce eyes. "Are you disobeying me?" Spencer was forced to lower his gaze. "No, sir." He had never disobeyed Dalen's orders. This was the first time he'd ever even spoken against him. He turned and left the house to carry out his orders. Victoria could barely contain a proud smile as she silently hung up the phone. Lucia must be scared out of her wits by now.
She was just waiting for Dalen to torture her to death. Did she think that it would be enough just to not let her go? The 2 children in her stomach would not have a good ending. Linda was still worried about her son's feelings. She comforted him. I did not expect this to happen. The truth is right in front of me. You can marry again and have more children. Let her go. That's right, Dalen. This means that Lucia is stupid. Who could be better than you? If I were your wife, I would never do anything to let you down. Victoria expressed her loyalty to Dalen. Actually, there's no need for Lucia to come here anymore. I can just directly send her away, Linda said. I really don't want to see her again anyways. He didn't know what kind of sin it was that caused such a shameful thing to happen. When did I say I was going to divorce her? Dalen's voice rumbled like thunder, and his black eyes were coal black. Linda and Victoria were both stunned. What do you mean? Linda was surprised. If you don't want to divorce her, then does this mean you want to raise another man's children with her? Are you crazy? Linda almost couldn't sit still. She was so perturbed. You believe the children in her womb belong to someone else? Dalen looked at Linda with a cold expression. The paternity test is here. How can it be fake? Why would I ever want to hurt you or trick you? Linda's face did not look too good after hearing Dalen's words. We're going to wait for her. Dalen sat on the sofa and did not say another word. This confused Linda and Victoria. What on earth was Dalen thinking? Was this really his attitude after knowing the results of the paternity test? He should have been furious and gone straight back home to talk to Lucia. His reaction made Victoria feel uneasy. Could it be that Lucia's matter was going to turn around? Impossible. It must be calm before the storm. Otherwise, why would Dalen let Spencer bring Lucia here? Anyway, she decided to wait there to see what would happen to Lucia next. Spencer sat in the car with a serious expression. Dalen obviously knew about the paternity test, but he didn't ask about it. Was it because he agreed with Linda? Did he believe the result? That can't be right. This was not like him. Just as Spencer was about to leave, his phone rang. It was the mansion's bodyguard. Sir, I have some bad news. The young mistress is out. Why didn't you stop her? She threatened to hurt the children in her womb. We didn't dare to stop her, so we lost her. The bodyguard was extremely nervous. After all, if something happened, he would be in trouble. How long has she been gone? Spencer asked. 5 minutes. The car was pointed in the direction of the mansion. He sped over there. Spencer looked outside the window as they headed there. According to Lucia's calculations, she would not be able to get out of the mansion within 5 minutes. Halfway there, Spencer told the driver to stop. He got out of the car. Looking around, he saw that each side of the road was covered with dark green foliage. Needless to say, Spencer's calculations were accurate. Lucia would never be able to get out of the vicinity of the house within 5 minutes by relying on her legs alone. Lucia was hiding behind the bushes, bent over with difficulty. Spencer had gotten there too fast. The car was parked precisely in front of her when she looked up. She was afraid that Spencer would search in the shrubbery around her. After all, he definitely stopped here because he knew that she was somewhere around here. She wanted to quietly retreat and find a safer place to hide. However, she stepped on a dead branch, causing it to make a cracking sound. She was so scared that she almost stopped breathing. Hopefully, Spencer didn't hear it. But Spencer's sensitivity was quite good. He retracted his gaze and said to the people with him, She's somewhere over here. Go ahead and look in that direction. Yes, sir. The men drove on. Spencer moved closer to the bush where he'd heard the sound. Lucia struggled to bend her waist. She raised her head and met Spencer's face. Spencer looked at Lucia. Are you here to capture me? Lucia asked the superfluous question and took 2 steps back in fear, afraid that Spencer would grab her. Did he see it? It's false. The children belong to Dalen. They are his flesh and blood. Nothing must happen to them. Lucia's eyes were filled with tears, and her heart ached as if it was being torn apart. She was almost out of breath. "I told the others to go away," Spencer said. Lucia looked at him in confusion. Spencer's heartfelt feelings for Dalen were clear to her, yet here he was, wanting to help her. "You can escape," Spencer said. "You know this." Lucia's lips trembled on knowing he dismissed the others. Did he personally come to arrest her? No matter if the others were gone or not, Spencer alone made it impossible for her. "Your ring has a tracking device." "What did you say?" Lucia asked in disbelief. She looked down at the beautiful pink diamond on her finger. Nothing about it looked like it was hiding the tracking device Spencer mentioned. "Inside." Spencer took out a knife. "I'll help you get rid of it." Lucia held out her hand hesitantly. He inserted the sharp tip of the blade carefully into the ring. After all, sticking close to the flesh could easily injure the hand. "Don't worry about whether it will hurt me or not. Hurry up, please. Otherwise, if Dalen discovers me, I'll be done for," Lucia urged. Spencer didn't say anything. He focused on poking the ring with the tip of his knife. He first had to take off the ring before he could take out the tracking device. The tip of the blade was still stuck in the ring as he slowly removed the ring from his finger. After taking the ring off, Spencer used his knife to scratch the inside layer. Then he pressed the blade down, allowing a small device to pop through a hidden soft spot in the stone. Spencer destroyed it. Lucia could not imagine that there was a tracking device in her ring this whole time. Dalen's possessiveness was unimaginably terrifying. This was definitely something he had done after he'd lost his memory. No wonder she felt like Dalen could find her wherever she was, no matter where. So that's how it was. She would have been caught by Dalen even if she had run to the ends of the earth. "I'll let you go, but I can't find a place for you to hide," Spencer said. Letting Lucia go was already risky. The more he cared and helped her, the more Dalen would suspect that he had. "That's good enough. Thank you, Spencer," Lucia said gratefully. "You never betrayed Dalen, but today you have. Because of me." "This is not a betrayal. The current Mr. Patrick is not the real him. If he recovered his memories and I didn't help you escape, then I would be in trouble. Nothing harming you is the real Mr. Patrick's wish." Lucia smiled helplessly. Spencer had hurt her way too many times. She didn't know whether it was his sincerity or pretense. "Have you brought enough things?" Spencer looked at the bag on her back and asked. "Don't worry, I've brought everything I need. I'll be okay." Lucia turned around and left without a second thought. He stopped after walking a few steps and looked back at Spencer. "Take good care of Cole. He's a good person." Spencer blushed. "I will." "I'm relieved to hear you say that." Lucia's eyes burned with tears. She turned around and left without looking back. The moment Spencer went out, the subordinates of his came back. "I didn't see any trace of the young mistress." "I didn't either," Spencer said. "Then what should we do? Where can she have gone?" In order to buy Lucia some time, Spencer said, "Let's give this area one more pass." Lucia carried several $100,000 in cash on her back. It was rather heavy. However, it allowed her to feel at ease, knowing she had money for the future. She hailed a taxi. "Where to?" the taxi driver asked. If she said to go to the train station or to the airport, it wouldn't help. There were monitors everywhere. Dalen's forces would go straight to surveillance and find her easily. "Are you ready to take me on a long journey?" Lucia asked. "Where to?" "The East Coast." "Are you kidding me? You want to drive me to death?" Lucia wasn't in the mood to joke with him. "Ma'am, are you in trouble?" The driver's eyes were on her stomach. If she couldn't stay in the city safely, what else could she do? Go to the countryside? Lucia wasn't in the mood to talk about it anymore, so she said unhappily, "Fine, I need to go a few hours outside of the city. Can you do that?" "Of course. Isn't it stupid to not refuse money?" "Also, please take the back roads." He looked at her in the rear-view mirror. How could he say that she didn't offend anyone? She clearly sounded like she was running away. "I wonder what kind of person this woman is running away from," he thought. And should I just leave her alone? What if I get into trouble later? Spencer decided he'd finally need to call Dalen. Sir, Mrs. Patrick is missing, and we can't find her anywhere. What do you mean you can't find her? Dalen's expression darkened, and the temperature in the air dropped by a few degrees. I searched around the mansion a few times, but I didn't find anyone. Dalen hung up the phone, stood up, and left his mother's immediately. Linda hadn't even managed to say a single word before Dalen was already gone. Victoria looked upset as she thought about calling Lucia. Could it be that she'd inadvertently warned her and she'd run away? Lucia must have heard Dalen order Spencer to come get her. Suddenly, Victoria thought of something. She'd called Lucia's cell phone. She couldn't let Dalen know. Otherwise, he would blame her. Dalen got in the car and started to look through his phone. When he found the tracking app tied to Lucia's ring, he realized that the location had disappeared. Dalen's face instantly turned dark and scary. Halfway to the destination, the taxi stopped. Lucia was taken aback. Why did you stop here? We shouldn't go too far, the driver said reluctantly. You said you could go where I needed to. Lucia was rendered speechless by her master's unwillingness to go back on his word. You even said that it's foolish to say no to earning money. I've thought it through, the man said. I don't want your business after all. Lucia was both angry and anxious. It was a race against time for her, and this man was wasting her time. I'll pay more, she said. No, it's not a matter of money. I just don't want to go. I still have things to do later. I really can't, so please go. Lucia looked at him coldly. Are you afraid of offending someone? The man's eyes flickered guiltily. What could I be afraid of? I just don't want to give you a ride. Isn't that enough? What the hell? Lucia cursed. How had she given the taxi driver such a bad impression that he'd just abandon her? To put it another way, if the car was driving under surveillance, wouldn't that be equivalent to passing right under Dalen's nose? Right now, Lucia was under a lot of pressure to not get out of the car. However, she had no choice but to say, when your car arrives at a place that's not monitored, I'll get out. Why? It's not like I won't give you money. Lucia suppressed the rage in her heart. You don't need to pay extra. With a wave of his hand, the man made up his mind. Just get out now. Lucia was so angry that she was about to explode. Right now, people were coming and going all around them. Dalen could have spies all around and she'd never know. At this time, he must have realized that she wasn't in the mansion and had run away. Maybe he was even furiously looking for her now. Seeing that the driver was determined not to drive any farther, Lucia could only scold him. If you won't drive, I won't get out of the car. Then, when those people find me, I'll say that you and I are allies. What? The driver sputtered angrily. As you can see, the person I'm hiding from is someone with power and influence, and he's not someone a small commoner like you or I can deal with, Lucia said. Not only that, I'm pregnant right now. I assume that you're someone with a family. Don't you worry about your wife and children? The driver's expression immediately changed. Wasn't the reason he spent so much effort driving to give his children and wife a good home? Are you threatening me? Yes, I'm threatening you, Lucia said firmly, not hiding her intention at all. You are ruthless. The driver had no choice but to start the car again and find a place where there were no surveillance cameras. He went around to a desolate alley and stopped. All right, there's no surveillance around here, the driver snapped. You can get out here. He already felt quite unlucky and wanted to get rid of this person as soon as possible. Lucia took some change from her bag and handed it to him. You're still going to pay me extra? The driver thought she was going to try to ride for free. Of course, she said. I'm not a criminal. The driver took the money in surprise. Lucia pushed open the door and walked down the alley. The driver quickly drove away, afraid that the woman would go back on her word and ask him to take her somewhere else. This was the first time he had handled the type of business that scared him out of his wits. Dalen's car arrived at home, causing the servants to be quite frightened. Edward and John were the first to take the lead, their faces pale. "If she escapes for good, I'll make all of you pay." Dalen was furious. Edward lowered his head. "Sir, it's my mistake. I'll take responsibility." Dalen looked at Edward with hostility, then simply turned around and went upstairs. He looked at Lucia's side of the room and found that her backpack was missing. Dalen's sharp eyes glanced at the safe in the closet. He opened it and scanned through it, counting the cash inside. It was missing 200,000. Dalen's face instantly turned vicious. Had she already planned to leave him? How long had she been calculating? Why did she leave? Dalen immediately thought of the paternity test. Regardless of the reason, she was extremely daring to run away while she was pregnant with his children. The taxi driver was slowly driving around, searching for customers. As he looked out the window, he didn't notice the car in front of him for a moment. He glanced back and immediately stepped on the brakes. He had almost rear-ended a very expensive luxury car. If he so much as chipped the paint, he would cry. The driver raised his head and met a pair of eyes that were as cold as hell, causing him to back up in fear, but he was blocked by the force behind him. He was terrified as he turned around and saw a bodyguard in black clothes. Who had he offended? "You drove a pregnant woman around today. Where did she get out?" Dalen asked coldly. "Pregnant?" The driver searched through his memory and remembered the only pregnant woman she had ever carried. He must be talking about the one who threatened him. So fast. How did he find me so fast? The driver didn't dare to hide anything. He had never seen a person with such terrifying eyes. "Well, lead the way." Dalen was like being struck by ice. "Okay," the driver said timidly. He led the way until they arrived at the place where Lucia had been dropped off. "She wanted out here," the driver said. Dalen looked down the alley. There was no warmth in his eyes. His gaze was extremely sharp, as if he wanted to find any trace of Lucia possible. Lucia walked around the alley, wondering if she should find a place to stay first or catch another taxi and get even farther down the road. She was hoping that the most dangerous place was the safest, that she'd get lost in the crowd. Just as Lucia was thinking this, she noticed a foreboding group ahead of her. Lucia was so frightened that she stopped in her tracks. Although she didn't see Dalen, she recognized the car and immediately knew that Dalen had come. She was thankful that she didn't see Dalen himself. But how had he come here so quickly? She couldn't stay in this alleyway any longer. She had to leave immediately. Just as she was looking for a way out, she noticed that the other end of the road was blocked by Dalen's men. Lucia looked at 3 more entrances, but found that all of them were blocked. What should she do? Would she be unable to escape even if she had wings now? Damn it! If I'd known earlier, I wouldn't have hesitated to leave, she thought. And then I would have had even more time to get away. Why couldn't Dalen just let her go? At this moment, Lucia realized that not only could she not escape, the bodyguards at the various alleyway entrances were also closing in. It was like a net that had been spread open and was now gradually closing around her. Lucia was forced back and moved close to the wall as if she could disappear. She was really hoping it would be Spencer that would catch her and, just like before, let her go. However, the person who approached her was not Spencer. The bodyguards were getting closer and closer. Lucia walked with one hand on her stomach and the other on the wall. Tears of fear filled her eyes. If she was taken back to Dalen, she knew it wouldn't end well. She had to protect her children. She couldn't let them get hurt. Suddenly, Lucia had nowhere left to go. Her back that was pressed closely to the wall missed. She lost her balance and fell backwards. Before her panicked voice could be heard, a hand reached out from behind and covered her mouth. Rang her muffled cry. Covering her mouth, he dragged her backwards. Once inside, the door closed. Lucia was furious. "Let go of me right now!" Instinctively, she shoved him with her elbow. A man's grunt sounded in his ears, followed by a stifled laugh. "Can you control your hand a little?" Lucia's body froze. That voice! Lucia looked at Axel in shock. "Axel? Why are you here?" Lucia's expression changed as she thought of something. "Are you here to capture me too?" "Of course not," he said. Lucia heaved a sigh of relief. As long as Dalen didn't order them to go after her, it would be fine. "We can't stay here for long. Follow me." Axel took her hand and led her away. If Lucia did not follow Axel at this moment, she would be captured by Dalen. She couldn't let this happen. She couldn't let him hurt her and her children. She naturally had to find a new place to hide. If Dalen was sure that she was hiding in a dangerous neighborhood, then he would carry out a thorough search. Axel led her into a simple, plain room. He took a blanket off the side of a hollowed-out sofa that led to a cellar door. "Hide in here." Axel pushed her towards the dark hole. "What is this place?" "It belongs to a family who wants to help. No one knows about it." With Axel's help, Lucia entered the cellar. It was quite spacious down there and could accommodate quite a few people. "Hide inside and don't move," Axel said. "Be as quiet as you can." Lucia understood what he meant. "Aren't you going to hide here too? If Dalen finds out that you helped me escape, he definitely won't let you go." Axel had been imprisoned and tortured by Dalen for a long time before. He knew what Dalen was capable of. "If I hide here, who will help hide the entrance?" Axel comforted her. "Don't worry. I have a way to escape his sight. It's going to be okay." Axel came out of the cellar and closed the door. It was pitch black inside. "Is it very dark now?" Axel asked. Although she was in the cellar and Axel was on the other side, his voice sounded as if he were right beside her. "Don't be afraid," he said. "You're safe." "Yeah, I know." Axel covered the carpet, so it was impossible to see any signs of movement, and left. Lucia heard his footsteps retreat. Her heart was thumping hard. She stood in the darkness, her hands touching one wall, her back pressed against another, waiting for the storm to pass. As long as she could survive this crisis, she would be safe. God would hopefully hear her prayers and not be so cruel to her. The sound of heavy footsteps could be heard. Lucia's entire body tensed up as she held her breath. Footsteps came in, on the floor, moving closer and closer, scattering things all over the place. It wasn't hard to imagine. Right now, the bodyguards were searching. "There is no one here, sir." Dalen stood in a room that was dozens of square meters wide. His sharp eyes swept across every inch of the room, as if there was a penetrating force behind his gaze. He began to walk around. Lucia could not be more familiar with his steady and careful footsteps. As the sound got closer and closer to the sofa, even stepping on the floor above her head, Lucia was so frightened that she covered her mouth with her hands. If she didn't, she would scream in fear. Would Dalen discover her? Would he notice the blanket? Dalen looked around and spotted the blanket. At this time, Spencer walked over. "Sir, Axel wants to see you." Dalen stared at him, his black eyes malicious. Axel had already walked over. "Bro, what happened to Lucia? Even if the children aren't yours, I still hope that you can let her go." "Never." Dalen's face turned dark. "And this isn't any of your business." "I know that I don't have the authority to speak on this, but I was friends with her in the past, so I naturally don't want to see her get hurt," Axel said frankly. "You mean you want to fight me?" Dalen looked at him coldly. "You and I are cousins, and I don't want us to kill each other. But can't you let her go? She's a woman who might have done something wrong, but she shouldn't have to suffer your torture." "Axel, you crossed the line." Dalen's black eyes flashed with a savage light. "Don't think that I won't kill you." Even if you want to, for Lucia's sake, I will say the same thing, Axel said fearlessly. Dalen's cold face wore a cruel smile. Since that's the case, if you can't find her, then use your life to repay her. Then he pointed a gun at Axel's forehead. Axel closed his eyes. Shoot, I won't regret what I said. The more Axel was like this, the more it meant that he was in love with Lucia. Dalen's chest burned with fury. When he thought about Axel and Lucia's betrayal, the veins on the back of his hand bulged and his face turned dark. Then I'll help you. Lucia, who was still hiding below, clearly understood what was being said and what could possibly happen next. Dalen wanted to shoot Axel? That was his own cousin. How could he do such a thing? However, thinking about Dalen's viciousness, Lucia was scared for her own life as well. She couldn't let anything happen to Axel because of her. Just when she thought she would rather confront Dalen than let Axel lose his life for her, she heard a cell phone vibrating.